the DAWbench Radio Show, the official podcast of DAWbench.com.
Welcome to the DAWbench Radio Show. I am your host, Vin Curigliano of AAVIM Technology in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm joined again, co-hosting by Pete Brown of Microsoft in Maryland in the United States. How you going, Pete?
I'm doing well, but it's like 100 degrees here, so I'm also melting at the same time I'm doing well. So
That's all right. We're at the complete opposite here. So
I could use some of that.
No, okay. Now, welcome back as well, Pete, because you did miss the last show because you had a little bit of a travel lurg.
Airports are just a soup of all the things wrong with people, like every virus and bacteria and stuff. And it's like you can't walk through an airport without being exposed to everything everybody's been exposed to for the past year. So, yeah, I brought some of it back.
Yeah, is that where you reckon you copped it, or you didn't cop it at the build event? I thought just being at that event for, was it 2 weeks?
I was there with people for like 2.5 weeks, but like at the event, I'm the person who won't shake anybody's hand.
Oh.
Like if you get too close to me, I sort of back up. I have freaking alcohol wipes on that. Every time somebody like gets anywhere near me, I'm always, because I've never been like that in the past, but every time I go to one of these things, I get sick. So I think it's the airport.
Yeah.
I really do.
Well, and at the last show, remember we were talking about the Namthrax because you came home sick from there, remember? So, and I think Chris was saying that Michael, his business partner, also came back quite ill as well. So there you go. Now, waiting in the wings is also our other co-host, Chris Mann of Link Audio in Melbourne, Australia. Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, Vin. It is a little bit cold here in Melbourne, but we're going okay.
Yeah.
Rub it in.
Oh, mate, we don't get snow here, Pete, but
Close.
Yeah, I'm taking the dog for a walk and everything's frozen,
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to walk on the grass to have do her business. She's going, fuck that, I'm not going on that thing.
And we're not even in the middle of winter yet either.
No, it's been quite icy. So that's been an interesting adventure weather-wise. It's actually milder this week, so I wouldn't say warm, but it's actually hasn't been too bad. It's just rainy this week in Melbourne, It's
got a bit of miserable to it, doesn't it, Vin?
It has a bit of miserable, but it's all right. The kids are home from school, as you know, Chris.
That's the miserable part.
You'd be navigating. you'd be navigating that as well, but
Yes, I got two at home here.
You got to save that for the from the trenches talk next time we do it.
Look, the kids are all right. Mine are 15 and 17 now, and I think Pete, Chris, yours are older or younger? I can't remember.
No, I've got a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Okay,
so
they're
close.
Not, they're not too far off. And Pete, I think yours are kind of close to that as well. Aren't they?
15 and 18. So
there you go. We're all navigating that same teen space. So joy.
That's a whole different show on its own.
Oh yeah, that's not a TechBytes show. No, that's not even a DAWbench show. Look, I want to start the show with. I want to hand the mic to Pete, and if you can give us a summary and overview of that Microsoft Build event, because there's a lot of stuff that came out of that, and there was a lot of almost near hysteria that kind of came out from some of the announcements. Now, a lot of it was unnecessary as the information actually became clearer. But can you give us your eyes and ears and first-hand experience of what actually happened at that Build event? What was announced?
Yeah.
What was the important aspect of it? And then I'm going to respond just by being someone that wasn't there, just reading in on what was being reported. And my response to it was probably quite hysterical. Like when you came back and read all of these messages, because you were on radio silence for 2.5 weeks. I couldn't contact you for about 2.5 weeks. So you were reading all of these kind of messages in sequence and in context of me literally losing my shit, right?
You're making the assumption I read them all, but yeah.
You skimmed.
No, I read them.
You would have read the first sentence and gone, oh, fuck, he's on a rant again, right? And then and probably you'd skip to the bottom. So can you do that, Pete? Because I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah, I know it's a good event when I come back and there's like 30 unread messages
From me.
Like when I see that little red icon over there, I'm just like, oh goddamn! Like I can't handle this right now, and it is just staring at me on the taskbar for like a full day before I'm like, all right, I could do this now, and then read all your stuff. But no, like you have good observations, and you're also like a good kind of man on the street type of response to stuff. So I always do appreciate that, even though I have a hard time dealing with all the messages all at once. But
yeah, sorry, mate. It was 2.5 weeks worth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like 600 messages.
It was not.
It's getting so I can't tell the difference between when I get added to one of those spam ones where you suddenly look and there's like 300 new messages, and when there's stuff from Vin.
It's not.
No, I give you a hard time. It's not that many.
Okay.
It's a 2-digit number. So anyway, I went to build. This is going to be a fun show, I can tell.
Yeah.
So I went to build. So I was responsible for co-running the Windows track, like all of our sessions and content and stuff like that. So I was the lead on that. And so I was up there on campus for a couple of weeks before build, and also, helped a little bit with the keynotes for the Pavin and stuff, although that was largely settled by the time I got involved in that. So I had a pretty good view of all the content that we were going to do for the sessions and stuff themselves, right? And so there was also, right before build, the day before build, we had an event where we announced the CoPilot Plus PCs, and that was more of a consumer-focused event where we talked about, all the things of the ARM64 PCs, which are branded as CoPilot Plus PCs because they run a feature called CoPilot, and they have a button on them that can be used to launch that. And they're currently ARM64 PCs that have a powerful enough NPU to run all the stuff that we deem is necessary in Windows to be able to support CoPilot and other features here.
And that's 40 tops was the minimum requirement, correct?
I believe that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like they're pretty powerful PCs, and so we had the Surface ones there, and I think we also spoke a bit about some of the third-party stuff that's going to be coming down the road from other companies as well. So, and really, this was we've experimented with ARM. I don't want to say experimented. We've actually shipped products on ARM64 in the past, but they just weren't very fast. Like the previous SQ1 and SQ2 processors and stuff. They were good for general usage, but they just didn't have the performance people are looking for.
Right.
So we announced all that stuff the day before, and then at the build event itself, we started talking about the developer features. So we did spend a lot of time talking about CoPilot, as well as the AI models that are shipping with Windows for things like background replacement and optical character recognition and a bunch of other stuff that are going to be behind APIs that developers can use in Windows itself. And we had a bunch of sessions where we showed how to use those features, as well as, like some real use cases for some of this. And it was me, I'm kind of a AI skeptic in some ways, not as much as you, Vin, but I'm like, it's got to be valuable and it's got to be easy to use. The idea of AI for the sake of AI is just not interesting to me. But like when you start talking about things like the things that you use for noise removal and stuff in the podcasts here, like those are like super useful things to me.
Yeah, that's creative. That's creative AI over a generative AI.
Yeah. It's actually a tool that, like, I saw a post on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, not too long ago, where somebody was like, "Hey, I don't want AI to take over the creative stuff that I want to do. I want it to do the dishes and take out the trash, like, so I have more time to be creative." And,
yeah, correct.
And that, I think, is a really good view of that.
Yep.
So the elephant in the room, of course, is we had all the news about recall afterwards, which I'll be honest, I think we really kind of fumbled the ball in how we explained that to people at Build and whatnot, because there are similar features to recall on other operating systems that are optional, and we just sort of threw this out there. And the minute you say, "Hey, it's going to screen record everything you do and make it available for, like, 6 months or whatever, everybody's like, hey, wait a minute, that sounds pretty freaky, which I totally understand. Like I 100% understand that. And so that's where we got a lot of the press for that, because everybody kind of glommed. As soon as you said, screenshot everything you do every X number of seconds, like I think everybody stopped listening at that point.
Yeah, like everyone started freaking out, including me.
Yeah.
Including me.
Which I'll just say I 100% understand. So, and leave it at that. But so some other things have come out since then about like it'll be, I believe it's opt-in by default, and it's only supported on CoPilot Plus PCs, which right now is just that subset of ARM64 devices. So it's not something people will need to use or be required to use or have turned on by default if they don't want to use it. So I think that'll go some way towards explaining this, but also I don't know why we shipped the preview version of it with an unencrypted database like that. That seems like a miss to me.
Yep.
And that's what a lot of people figured out is like, hey, all this stuff is just available there on that drive. That was never the intention to ship the retail stuff that way, but really the team putting that out should have like had that sorted before it ever went in public bids, even though they're trying to meet deadlines.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we should just make a point of is that these new units that Microsoft have developed, they're running on the Qualcomm Snapdragon X processor. Now, those things are leaps and bounds ahead of what you had previously, and those things are going toe to toe, instruction per clock against pretty much the best of anything x86 and Apple Silicon. The multi-threading stuff is up there as well. Now, the thing is, though.
So what I saw, Vin, before you go down that path, so what I saw for the performance comparisons there was, and maybe this is what you meant by clock for clock.
Yep.
The Apple Silicon stuff is clocked higher by default, and so had better single core scores. But then I was reading an article by a third party that said, hey, if you scaled this up, so if the Qualcomm Silicon would clock at the same rate, which I don't know what it takes to make it do that, these would actually be as good, like they're completely on par. But because they're not clocked the same, they're a little bit slower on, I think, the single core benchmarks, if I recall.
But I was just about to say benchmarks, and I'm doing air quotes as well, right? Because it's going to be really difficult to do a comparative with that, because they're going to cherry pick, and everyone cherry picks. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's Apple, it's Qualcomm, it's Intel or AMD. They're all cherry picking stuff, and so Geekbench and all of the others that we just love, Pete. I take everything with a couple of grains, but I do know that those new generation Qualcomm's the ARMs are quite powerful. And I think, forget about the IPC. I mean, the IPC is up there, and it doesn't. When I say instruction per clock, I didn't even really pay any attention to the actual clock speed. I know that they actually are quite healthy in the architecture itself in delivering those processors. So that aside, the more important thing is the amount of power that these units run, which is minuscule, and this is why they're actually targeting that laptop space first, because the majority of people have laptops. They don't really care about outright performance. I mean, obviously there are people that do use the laptops for creative stuff as well, but the majority of it is, well, I need this thing to run, when I unplug it, and the battery life and the fan noise. It's as simple as that, right? If you poll 100 consumers, okay, what's important with your laptop? And I bet you they'll say battery life and noise level would probably be two primary.
Weight would be the third one. Yeah.
What's that? What's the third one? Sorry.
Weight.
Oh yeah. Well, but all of these things are so thin,
Yeah.
And this is where Intel and AMD need to kind of step up. So, I mean, we can cover 100%. That. We can cover that a little bit more. But that's the crux of it. Now, did you have anything else? Did you want to just share with the build?
So I know it got lost in the kind of the AI swamp of news, but we also, did some stuff for our UI platform on Windows for developers, as well as we did also talk about some general ARM64 stuff and some things like that. Nothing specific to musicians at Build, but some things that will eventually accrue well, especially when you talk about battery life to musician workloads. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and look, and I'm just going to give you my response to what the information that it was filtering out and and how I reacted to it. Now, the first thing that came out was, the 40 tops requirement. And at the time of the announcement, and there was a huge focus on these are ARM and Qualcomm, and I could just be a fly on the wall at Intel and AMD going, what the fuck is this, right? Because the CPUs at the time of release, their mobile CPUs that had NPUs didn't have anywhere near 40 tops, right? And tops is, let me have a look here, Tera Operation per second, whatever that means, right? So it's just basically the level of processing. Oh, here we go. Trillions of operations a system can perform. And this is different from the CPU. These are kind of very dedicated processing instructions run on the NPUs. Now, Intel and AMD and their little mobile solutions, I can't remember. I think it was in the 20s, I think. It was somewhere like that. But what it felt like to me, and I did actually voice this to you, Pete, was that it felt like they got thrown under the bus, right? And I'm thinking, wow, what? Hang on, what's going on here, right? So Microsoft have had this launch event. They've got this Qualcomm. It's got the 40 tops, and I think we had this discussion where I'm going, where did they come up with the 40? And I think you said, well, the M4 is going to have 38. I went, well, 2 more, right? So
I did jokingly say like maybe that's the driver, but really what it is, it's like that was, and this is probably how Apple arrived at 38 as well. It's kind of the minimum to be able to run the types of AI workloads that you can stick behind an API and have run in real time without impacting the rest of the operating system performance.
Okay, right. So the existing laptops from Intel and AMD didn't have enough tops, right? So it just felt like to me, I'm going, man, these guys have been thrown under the bus. Now, of course, Intel and AMD were going to respond to that. And so we get to Computex, and, they've both got announcements of the new mobile processors that are coming out. So I think, AMD call them, AMD got a ridiculous name for them. Hang on. You ready? Wait for this one. The AMD call them AI 3000. Wow. That's a fantastic name. Right? I never would have thought of, that marketing department's working overtime.
I don't know. It might still be better than Microsoft. So
yeah. Intel, I mean, they call them Lunar Lake, which is their code name. They're just going to come out as ultra processors. But of course, both Intel and AMD had a response to that. And surprise, surprise, Pete, those new Intel and AMD mobile processors with the NPUs have tops at, I think, 48, 45, 48. So they're above the required 40. So, geez, what a surprise, right? But I've got to tell you, I watched the keynote at Computex for both Intel and AMD. And you know how much I love keynotes, Pete. I'd rather be watching paint dry. But both of them were very, very painful. But AMD, I can't remember her name, but the CEO, she's holding up the chip, and then she's invited someone from Microsoft onto the stage, and it was just so awkward. I'm like going, oh man, this is painful. And so the poor guy from Microsoft's trying to explain, hey, thank you very much. We're working together, and it's great to see that the next chip's going to have the required processing power, but that was really awkward. That was live as well, right?
So that was Pavan from. He's the same one that did the Windows part of the keynote at Build. And he's the VP in charge of Windows. So I did watch that as well. And I know he came right out of Build, but I don't know, maybe it was the production or something down there, but I
look, I felt for him because it just felt like he drew the short straw and he came onto the stage. And of course, then Intel had their keynote the next day, and I don't even want to even review what that keynote was like, because it was, I mean, if it was a couple of layers of cheese, it was just terrible.
But did they have anybody doing parkour across the stage and, landing or anything like that?
No, but they had all these ridiculous da-dums and curtains falling down. And I'm like, oh, can you stop? Just stop. Right? just give us the information. And of course, they've held up, the Lunar Lake chip and 48 tops, so we can run, the Microsoft, CoPilot PC, and they didn't have anyone from Microsoft Live, but they had
Satya,
via video, which looked even more kind of awkward. But
well, he doesn't do live presentations at third-party conferences for the most part. So landing them on video was actually a bit of a cool thing for Intel, but yeah, I could see how that looks.
Yeah. So look, so I'm kind of absorbing as much information as I possibly could about all of this stuff. But my initial reaction was, okay, so they've been thrown under the bus, they've responded, right? Which was going to be pretty obvious that they would, right? But personally, the thing that was really concerning me was recall. As you covered, I'm reading this and I've gone, listen, anything that's actually recording everything that you do on your computer. I mean, literally everything, every mouse movement, every folder opening, every application opening, everything that you do, we had a name for that.
Except for DRM protected stuff and in private / incognito mode, yeah.
Yes, yeah, but we have a name for something that actually records all of your movements on a machine.
I'm just going to go la, 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 la.
Yeah, you can go la, la, la. But I mean, and I said, Pete, we had a name for that. That's called spyware, right? And then I'm reading a couple of articles actually mimicking exactly the same thing. I've gone, okay, well, I'm not on an island, obviously. But I was really concerned about it. And I remember I was asking you, I said, Pete, please tell me you can disable this. And at the time, I don't think you had an answer for me about it.
No, because we didn't put the announcement out yet about what it'll be enabled on. Or like I said, I don't think we did a good job explaining it at launch. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, look, again, I was losing it. I've gone, mate, if this thing is actually something that's running in the background 24/7 and I can't easily and officially disable it, I'm heading for the door. I can't see myself deploying.
It's one of the first things I ask teams whenever there's sort of a feature like that gets announced internally. I'm like, okay, are we going to have a switch to disable it for people not thinking even about the privacy or other concerns here, which I am not blowing off at all. But more about like everybody that we work with needs max performance on their PCs. And even if something takes just a little bit of CPU, when you're trying to perform live or you're working in a DAW, that CPU counts. So that's kind of my go-to question now is like, can we disable it if we want to?
Yeah.
And is there an official way to disable it?
Yeah. Look, for me, it wasn't as much about the resources that it was taking. It was just the simple fact that it's actually recording every movement, right? So that's the thing that was freaking me out. I mean, even to the point, and that I actually put in my application for IoT qualification again, all right? And for people not listening in, IoT qualification will allow me to do R&D on LTSC with a long-term service channel, right? Which is a stripped-back version of Windows, which I actually really like, but it's not really viable to deploy without a hell of a lot of work because, I mean, it won't have recall for a start, but it's missing like basic apps, and it's also missing the Windows Store, which you can actually re-enable. But, I mean, there's a lot of work. But this is like a core Windows build without a lot of the end user experience stuff, and a lot of people listening and going, "Gimme that thing for a DAW." All right, but the practicality of it is that it's really only licensed to IoT application, which is embedded systems. Right now, I actually applied and received the qualification probably around 2016, and I had a play with it. I loved it. But the bottom line is you can't update it, right?
Right.
And the thing for me, I was seriously looking at it, but I'm thinking, hang on, is this going to get the MIDI 2 patch? And you went, no. I went, fuck, there goes that idea, right? But I was really concerned. I'm going, I don't really want to go navigating in a Windows environment where I'm having to disable recall. It was something that really freaked me out. So then when we saw the announcement where it just said, okay, it's opt-in. For the first announcement I saw, Microsoft have changed or backtracked. I can't remember the exact wording, right? But they've just said, no, it's not going to be, it's going to be opt-in. And then the next announcement was, well, it's actually on hold. Pause. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's not even in the builds at the moment, is it?
Yeah, it's not in just yet, I don't believe.
Yeah.
But so what we said is it'll be opt-in, and the screen that does that is super clear, and it does give you a clear choice one way or the other. The other is it's CoPilot Plus PCs only, so none of the PCs you build would have that on there. And it is off by default. Like I think that's probably the key thing people wanted to know.
Yeah.
But the other stuff is that we covered was about it, the encryption of the data that's on there, because the concern was, and given the preview builds people had, it was definitely a legitimate concern that if you did get malware on your PC, if all those screenshots and stuff were not encrypted, then
bye-bye.
Like everything's just like laid out so that any piece of malware can get it. So it's encrypted, but also requires proof of presence, so that like you need to have your face in the camera or whatever when you're looking at it. So
right.
there is a bunch of stuff there. Whether or not it's like, consumers generally find it the potential trade-off, I should say, they're worth it or not for the feature, because it's honestly, it is super useful if you get past the other stuff. Like if you think of it just from a product management standpoint, where somebody's like, if we had a feature where you can say like, hey, I was looking at a couch 3 weeks ago, but I don't remember where I saw it. Where did I see it? Like having that available to you is actually super useful. Or I was working on a document, I don't remember where that was, et cetera. So there are use cases for that. Yep. But it kind of depends on where you sit on the spectrum of concern there.
Yeah. And we won't mention, corporate clients being able to monitor every move that their clients, their employees are actually doing or not doing.
Yeah, I'm always, whenever something like this comes out, I'm always like, all right, so what happens if an IT administrator decides to say, oh, I'm going to start monitoring everything? And that's actually, some of those things are addressed in the blog post that explains who can and can't see it, who can and can't enable it. Like this is something that can only be enabled locally. It can't be pushed down by policy and stuff. So I think those are important steps to have taken.
Yeah. And just to, now, Apple have also released, they've jumped on that AI. I go AI, Sigh. That's what I'm kind of writing with this big exclamation mark, because it's, oh man,
and they're trying to own AI. You saw they said AI, it's Apple Intelligence. It's like, God damn it.
Give me a break.
Can you not?
Yeah, good old RDF. Oh, look, I actually, when you told me that you watched their keynote, was it about a week after Computex, I think, or was it during Computex? But anyway, I started watching it. I remember
it was really good.
It was it? Yeah, okay. Well, I didn't
except for the parkour.
I didn't
with the Trivago guy. It was really good.
What the fuck was going on there? But I didn't get through the whole lot. I admit it. But
yeah.
The thing was, well, what's with the matching runners? I couldn't deal with it, Pete.
There has to be a standard set of footwear that most executives at Apple are required to wear, because at least half of them had exactly the same pair of sneakers on.
Pete, the last time I saw a requirement for matching runners. Do you know where I'm heading with this one?
Does it involve Kool-Aid or?
Yeah, it was the Heaven's Gate guys. They're all kind of got dressed up and had their matching runners because they were going to the higher place. I mean, I'm like, I think I said to you, Pete, I said, this is reminding me of Heaven's Gate. I can't. I've had enough.
that aside, I thought they did a really good job of like, so one thing that we did at Microsoft is we talked about AI as a thing. One thing I think Apple did a really good job on, and I maybe disagree with our own internal marketing folks on this, which, maybe it'll get me a nasty email later. I don't know. But I think they did a much better job of articulating the benefits where they talked about, hey, here's a feature, here's a feature, here's a feature that developers can use. And then later on, they're like, oh, and it's all backed by AI, which stands for Apple Intelligence. And again, I feel like slapping somebody on that. But they did a really good job of, I think, explaining all that.
It's not artificial intelligence. It's Apple. Come on, mate. The RDF is strong.
Oh, man. Like, in 5 years, people are going to be like, Apple invented AI.
Oh, of course they did. Of course. Like everything else.
Don't get me wrong. I like Apple. I have friends at Apple. Those friends are not in their marketing department.
Thankfully. Hey, Chris, you've been very quiet there. Have you got any kind of thoughts on any of the discussion that we've just gone over?
I clearly haven't had anywhere near the level of excitement over the last 6 months as you guys have. But boy, I don't really top that.
Yeah.
Look, for me,
tops, haha.
Yeah. How many tops there, man?
Oh, it's too early for that, isn't it?
Well, hang on. Here we go. Tops, mate. NVIDIA. That's another one. NVIDIA. Anywhere from 1,000 to 1,300 tops on the current RTX. So, when we're talking 40, it's kind of like, what?
Yeah, but it's going to run your PC like a steam train at that point, right?
Yeah, of course.
You're going to need a fan blowing in the back permanently.
Yeah. So, sorry, Chris, I cut you off, man.
No, it's okay. Look, I mean, for me, since the last show, everyday work of wholesale and distribution's been pretty tough. Retail's pretty tough.
Yep.
I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later down in the show as well. But we're pedaling twice as hard for the same amount of distance. So it is, retail is hard. Musos are doing it hard at the moment.
Yep.
Thank goodness for commercial audio and installation and mastering guys, because they seem to be on fire and spending money. So that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's retail's been, everything's on sale. Everything has another deal. Buy this, get 3 of those. It's certainly heading into difficult terrain. But I've been also working on the side on a bit of a special video project. My dad is 81 this year and has decided to make a bit of a video on his life journey of migration from over in Europe to Australia.
Awesome.
So he's been working. It's been about a 2-year in the making project, and being that age now, his time in front of the screen is only really allows him to do it in bits and pieces. So I've been handed the whole project, and I'm doing some post on it. I've been doing that for about 6 months, probably the longest project I've worked on. Some of the cuts and audio and stuff are all over the place, but I have been using the latest Final Cut 10.8, which has some of these AI features.
Yep.
The color grade and the slow-mo. I can't use the slow-mo because the slow-mo only works on Apple Silicon, but the color grading is pretty interesting. It takes a bit of a guess at what you're doing and actually gives you the results and the figures on sliders, which it never did before. So it's actually pretty good, but I like the fact that you can tweak it after it sort of does its thing. So we'll talk a little bit more about AI as we go through this show, but I was looking yesterday at that, and Apple in all their marketing and Logic also at the same time, the new version has got some of these AI features as well. But interestingly enough, they're also starting to brand it as machine learning. I think they've sort of changed the marketing a little bit when these apps got released. So interesting, and they're good tools. They're not always accurate, but they are interesting. So that's kind of been me for probably the last 6 months working on it. It's been a difficult project actually when you're sort of dealing on a family thing like that. It's very good what my dad's put together, and it's 28-30 minutes of my history. So I've got to get that finished, and there's actually a big launch in a couple of weeks on his birthday, so pressure now. So
are you releasing that publicly?
No, I don't think so. I think it'll just be a family.
Okay.
I mean, look, I'll show it to anyone that wants to see it. But your family's probably got a similar sort of migration story. But I said to my dad, "Hey, jot some stuff down." So we've got some records of stuff, and of course he took that as let's make a Spielberg movie out of it. Which is great. It's excellent hand me down. I mean, to kids and grandkids, but. That's been and obviously I also did the thing I tell no one to ever do. I upgraded my Final Cut right in the middle of the project just because I was bored. But I did make a copy of it first. Don't worry.
Yeah.
No. Look, all the stuff you've been speaking about, it is interesting. I was following a little bit of it. I don't know.
The machine learning thing you mentioned is interesting because they do tend to use those terms interchangeably and often incorrectly.
Yeah.
But, because machine learning is a part of the AI process, as opposed to actually running those models that were trained and learned and stuff like that earlier.
Yeah, I was about to say machine learning is just an aspect of training the AI model, isn't it? Yeah.
But I guess maybe AI is getting a dirty reputation in some areas, and they're like, all right, it's ML now. Or maybe it's because they want to differentiate it and say it's not Apple intelligence. It's now ML, Microsoft Learning. That's what we'll do.
Yeah. It is interesting though, isn't it? I think if you went and asked a whole lot of non-tech people about AI, they would definitely be telling you that Skynet's about to go live and we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of that. So I think there's even a lot of the advertising you see on TV now with some of this stuff. They are trying not to use the words AI as much, I feel.
Well, you said Skynet, hey? Well, mate, I was reading an article where the American military already have fighter jets that are completely pilotless and they're actually winning in simulated dogfights, aerial. And we're not talking simulation, we're talking aerial. They've got these things flying around with no pilot and winning in simulated dogfights. So, yeah, let's not go there. Yeah. And look, and you're right, Chris, in regards to my family. Well, my family, we've been here. Mum and Dad, their family, we started coming out in the early 50s. So we've been here, we've got 3-4 generations in now.
Yeah, same.
And we did the family tree, but not via video. We did some DNA stuff and genetic tracing and stuff. And we found some amazing stuff that I wasn't aware of, but that's a whole other show. But, it's interesting that you're doing it. That's great.
So, Chris, where'd your family originate, or where'd they come from, if you don't mind sharing?
My family, mostly from Greece, is where both my parents are from. But Dad actually came back and forwards to Egypt for a little bit of time too while the war was on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So and then found themselves here. So and honestly, as I'm editing this and doing some post touches, I'm like, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, you should see what my genetic percentages are. I mean, the majority of it is Southern Italian. I mean, that's going to be pretty obvious. But, mate, I've been getting things like Levant, Cypriot, Albanian. I'm like, going, what? Where are all of these, percentages coming from? But, and Levant is Middle East. And I thought, look, I suppose if you see me, there's probably a little bit of Middle East there, I suppose, Anyway, we're getting completely sidetracked.
Yeah, back on track.
Okay, so let's swing this back. Look, I'll cover my last 6 months since we last spoke with the DAWbench project, because I can tell you now that I'm not going to be releasing anything in 2024, and all the work that I've been putting in with the project is due for a 2025 release. There is that much work still to do. But I mean, I think the last time we covered this, I was heading into developing a real world mix session. Yes, I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's no means it's been about 6 months. We've been working on this with my friend Marcus in the UK. And how this came about was that, what triggered it was a thread that Marcus had started at Gearspace, where he was saying, hey, I've got, an AMD 7950 and I've got an Apple Silicon laptop, and the Apple Silicon laptop has got, 1/3 of the cores or 1/4 of the number of cores, logical, because the AMD had 32 logical. The AMD was really working on 8 performance cores, but he was getting very similar, if not better, performance on the Apple, and this was running in Cubase, and we were trying to get to the bottom of it. And I've just said, well, call up your task manager and have a look how the thread management is happening. And, I've just said, I bet you there's a whole stack of cores that are not being used in the AMD. And sure enough, and then we headed down this rabbit warren where it was seeing the first 16, ignoring the last 16. And I'm thinking, well, what the fuck is it doing? Because that, to me, looks like a threading model that is very reminiscent, or not very reminiscent, it looks like the Intel hybrid threading model, because via the DAW thread management to the task scheduling via the thread director, it preferences the performance cores first, right? And then at a certain point, it will saturate the performance cores and then start offloading to the economy cores. Now, I can do that pretty easily in my simulated saturation tests, right? So I can sit there with my DAWbench DSP or my DAWbench VI. I can incrementally load the sessions, and you see the P cores completely get saturated, and all of a sudden starts offloading to the E cores, right? This is in most of the DAWs. But Cubase shouldn't be applying that threading model to non-hybrid Intel CPUs. I mean, that's just a given. I mean, this is not a P-core, E-core. This is completely a P-core CPU. We're talking about 7950. We're also talking about 10980, the X299 series, the 10 series. And so I couldn't, we couldn't make heads or tails of what was going on. And this is in real-world mix sessions as opposed to the normal incremental benchmarks, because they were actually loading up all the cores. So I put a stack of work. We went into like 8 revisions of this session. So Marcus ported the identical mix session across to 3 DAWs. So he did a bulk of the work at the start. And then I just said, send me those sessions as templates, get rid of the audio so that there's no copyright infringement, because it was a client session of his. And I went, just leave everything as place markers, all your plugins, number of tracks, how you've grouped everything, all the effect sends, the bus mastering, the whole thing. And then I developed a DAWbench version of that test, right? And I used sine waves where I needed to, but then I sent the session back, and then we compared his real-world session to my session and I replaced all the plugins with really high-quality freeware, so it makes it nice and easy for anyone to run the test. And so I sent the sessions back, but we're going backward and forward, and his real-world session and my DAWbench mix session was performing identically across the machines. I went tick, tick, right? So that way I've got a way of being able to replicate what the client is seeing in front of them when you start getting these really weird performance issues in real-world sessions, right? So what have we discovered? Man, I mean, and this is a really deep rabbit warren, right? So, and we've closed off on this, and I'll get to the end of it, and because I haven't had any direct communication with Steinberg, but Marcus has. I'll share what I can, right? So initially there was, they were crossing their arms saying there is no problem with the threading, and I'm saying to myself, what are you talking about? Look at it. That is not the way that a non-hybrid CPU should be thread managing via the task scheduler. So something is getting in the way there, right? What made it even worse was that when we duplicated that session across the multiple DAWs, then we could see a snapshot of how each DAW was handling the exact session logistics with the grouping and the effect sense. Studio One was kind of similar. Reaper just completely threaded normally to the 32. So we knew there was, the capability there. So what was actually, what was causing the whole dynamic where it's hitting the first 16, ignoring the last? Because again, it looked like an Intel hybrid threading model on a CPU that shouldn't be getting that dynamic applied. And so we went across 4 different DAWs. All of them actually threaded a little bit differently. They all performed very, let's just say identically on an Intel hybrid, as they should have, right? So that's a tick. It was the non-hybrids that we were sitting there, scratching our heads going, okay, what is going on here? And there was another variable that got introduced in Cubase 13. Between 12 and 13, Steinberg had said that they'd done some further optimization to the Intel hybrid CPUs. And when we were testing on the 7950, obviously, there was nothing really between 12 and 13. The performance pretty much identical, any of the non-hybrids. On the Intel, what we noticed was that the additional optimization, if you want to call it that, is that they were reserving the first 2 logical cores. So the first core was getting knocked out and reserved, and it was being completely ignored. And the further I investigated, we discovered that those first 2 cores were reserved for GUI elements. Now, Pete, I need some help here, right? And what I mean by GUI elements, if you've got a session, a long session that you need to scroll across the arrange window or, across the mixer, we were getting a spike, right? Now, this actually was introduced in Cubase 10. So it was at the change due to the M word, right? So when they changed the engine after they hit the wall with the MMCSS threading, that fundamental change, there was, when you were scrolling GUI elements, there was a spike, and it's usually landing on logical core 3 is from memory. And the problem there was that if you've got a session that's already got some primary load, a pre-existing load across the cores, and you scroll across, it would be spiking. So there was a possibility of you causing a click or a clip. So what they've done is they've moved the GUI to those 2 first reserved cores. Now, Pete, can you give me any angle on why they would be doing that? Because, prior to the Cubase 10 and that fundamental change, like Cubase 9.5 back, you could sit there and scroll to your heart's content. It was not hitting the CPU at all. So what do you think is going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the code and I haven't talked to them about this, so I'm just guessing at this point. But it seems to me like it probably is not a rendering task that's happening, because but maybe it's like a demand loading thing or something where like we do this a lot in other GUI frameworks where you virtualize the items that are in a grid, and like they don't get loaded until you scroll and they're visible, and then you have to do whatever processing on them that you have to do to get them loaded. And so my gut says that's probably it, because if it's just scrolling, that should be generally cached as a bitmap or something that they can scroll through, and it only has to render on the GPU, not do anything with the CPU. Yeah. But again, complete guess. I have no idea how that's architected.
And anyone can actually test that if they've got Cubase version 10 onwards, and you've got if you've got a reasonably large session, just scroll your mixer or the scroll across your arrange window, and you'll see it. The spike is there. It's quite obvious, and it's not even disputed. But that was an interesting thing. So, and again, this is just observable stuff for me, right? So, Intel hybrid CPUs have 8 performance cores, 16 logical threads. Now, remember, 16, right? So just keep that in mind. Dropping 2 out drops it down to 14. Now, where have we heard 14 before, Pete? And it's coming back to the multimedia class scheduler.
Do I need to go run away?
You need to run away because I've got a bone to pick with you, my friend. And it's coming. And
good.
So the 14, and again, this is may or may not be related, but all of a sudden we've got a magic number of 14, and 14 was the number of available logical cores that was imposed when the MMCSS thread limit was applied at Windows 10, right?
In Steinberg's implementation,
because we had, and again, I'll just run it through really quickly, 32 available threads, 4 reserved for Windows, the operating system itself leaving 28, and then every call that the Cubase audio engine was making was taking 2 threads, and it dropped it down to 14. So anything above a 6-core, 12-thread CPU could potentially there'd be thread collisions going on. So we've already covered this a million times, and so that was an interesting thing for me. All of a sudden, they've dropped back to 14. So I'm thinking, are these guys starting to hit MMCSS limits again? All right, and now I'm going to fast forward, right? And this is where I have a bone to pick with you, Pete, because at the end of the last TechBytes show, and I remember you and Chris were giving me shit because I'd kind of taken off on a few rants like I usually do. But
oh, wait a minute. So why aren't you picking on Chris? Come on, Chris. Come here and take your abuse.
Well, but it wasn't Chris that was trolling me about the M words, right? At the end of the TechBytes show, you go, hey, Vin, we got to the end of the show and no one mentioned the M word. I've got this really interesting thing. I'm thinking, all right, good on you.
So now you're going double down.
Yeah, all right. No, but hang on. What you didn't know, Chris, at the time, and what I didn't know at the time, because Pete had given us his full roundup of NAM, right? If you remember at the start of the show. And I said, did you, was there anything interesting coming out of NAM? And, Pete covered all this stuff. But what he neglected to tell us was that he had a conversation with a major software DAW developer where they had, what's the best way to describe this, Pete? They'd hit the MMCSS wall again, hadn't they?
I'll be serious. I don't remember any of this.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
no, not even trolling you, Ben. I don't remember.
Okay, you don't remember trolling me, right? But the only time I found out about this was at the end of the MIDI 2 show, because this whole MMCSS thing is
right. With
it's a running joke
of them. Yeah.
It's a running joke between myself and Pete for since 2016 and or 2018, and we get to the end of the MIDI 2 show, and I go, hey Pete, we got to the end of the show, we didn't mention the M word again, and what did you say to him? You said something in the vein of,
well, there was the MIDI API at the time allocated some CSS threads, and somebody came back to me and they're like, hey, we've hit the limit again, and the MIDI API is taking them. So,
right. And I've gone, well, who would that have been? And when you told me, just to say politely that I'd lost my shit, and poor old Andrew and Gary were listening and going, what the fuck? Is this guy unhinged? Because I completely lost it at you, Pete. I'm going, hang on. You were trying to tell me that our friends at Steinberg, and it is Steinberg, had hit the MMCSS limit, and you neglected to tell me. And I can't remember what you said. It's just like, I thought it'd probably be better, right? And I thought, well, eventually it was going to come out. So here's the detail of it.
So just so you know, so they didn't hit a limit. This was part of the discussion we had where they're like, hey, the API is using up some of these very valuable MMCSS threads, and we tested and made sure that I knew about that. So yeah, we know about it. But it's not that they hit a limit on it. It's just that they saw that, hey, we're taking more of this very limited resource.
I beg to differ. Because here is the official Steinberg support literature, right? Where when you do hit the limit, it says MMCSS priority cannot be set because they've gone above the thread limit, right? So they're saying is that Windows creates 2 MMCSS threads for each MIDI input port. When MIDI-RT MIDI is enabled, Cubase Nuendo, this is interesting, creates an MMCSS thread for each logical core, right?
Now, that's with the older WinRT API. Yes, all right,
okay.
So that's a different...
Okay, but this is the thing that they were hitting. It's got nothing to do with MIDI 2.
Yep.
So the interesting thing for me there is that, okay, so it creates 2 MMCSS threads per MIDI input port, and Cubase creates an MMCSS thread for each logical core. So all of a sudden it's not 2, it's 1, right? So, but if you've got a high core CPU, right, and it's applying 1 MMCSS thread per logical core, you're already tapped. It's gone, right? So then if you start introducing a number of MIDI input ports, there's no threads available, right? So what was happening was that in Cubase 13, people were getting this warning that they couldn't complete this process that they were doing with the MIDI stuff. So they were running into problems, and the thing was, I can't remember whether it was crashing or anything else, but they were running into problems and they couldn't actually complete the task that they needed to with the MIDI implementation, right? The thing that I find most frustrating with this, right, is that, well, a couple of things. One, they knew about it in Cubase 12, right? So they knew about it in Cubase 12, but they didn't throw the warning up in Cubase 12, right? They were just allowing this thing to crash out. So the end users are going, well, why the hell is this thing actually failing and crashing out? They only decided to throw up the warning in Cubase 13. So that's one thing, bone that I'd pick with them, right? The second thing is that what was their solution, Pete? And this is the thing that got my backup, right? And I wrote
on that support post, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing was is that, so what was their solution? Well, one of them was a reduced number of logical CPU cores. Okay, so that keeps you under the MMCSS thread limit. But why would you want to do that, right? Well, because it would actually stabilize the system. So, the other ways you can deactivate hyperthreading, sure, or minimize your number of cores, right? So that's kind of like cutting off one leg just to kind of resolve the possibility of instability. But the other one, and this is the one that got me, right, was they said, well, you can increase the number of MMCSS threads. I've gone, oh, really? Hang on. That sounds familiar, Pete. Just help me out here, mate. Wasn't that something that you and I, and a collective of people, we worked together, and didn't we get that across the line in 2018, right?
Yeah, that was a while ago, but we got that as sort of the official workaround from the kernel.
Yeah, I called it the unofficial MMCSS.
Yeah, official workaround.
Yeah, unofficial workaround.
Yeah, but so what that works around, and I don't remember if I've explained this on this call before, but it only makes sense to have one allocated MMCSS thread per logical core because it runs at the highest priority that's not kernel, right? It runs super fast. And so what happened is, and I'm going to explain this in a little bit more detail here, is Steinberg's not using the thread pool to get available ones, but also Microsoft isn't using the thread pool in those MIDI APIs to get them either. It's pre-allocating them, just like presumably what Steinberg's doing. So none of us are playing by the rules the kernel team's expecting us to play by. So it turns out the only thing you can do is increase the number of MMCSS threads available in the system.
Yep. And again, this is a fix that we got.
Yeah.
What did you call it? Officially, unofficially. Well, I call it the unofficial MMCSS.
Unofficially official, something like that. Yeah.
Right. And the reason I call it unofficial is that it's not permanent, right? So it is a registry entry. I mean, there's no secret. We've spoken about this multiple times. So it is a registry entry. It has to be actually created, and you can assign it to whatever. And at the time, I think you said to me, well, let's do it the number of cores plus an extra 4. And I've gone, fuck that. I'm just going to go, what's the maximum they're allowing me? And you said 128. I went, thank you, 128 it is, right? And that's worked perfectly. And on the machine that I'm actually recording on at the moment has an MMCSS thread, and it's running a pre-version of Cubase, running 9.5. And the reason I do that is that I'm totally reliant on the real-time engine to be absolutely solid for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. So you know what? This is the thing for me, and it works perfectly, right?
And for our use cases, that makes total sense because these applications, even though they're pre-allocating them, are supposed to be using those. And what the team told me before, though, is that there were lots of applications that were in Windows that had no business at all allocating these high priority threads. They just wanted to run faster.
Right.
And so we're allocating MMCSS threads, not using the pool and stuff like that. So they had to put a limit on it. Otherwise, the kernel wouldn't have time to run.
Yeah. And look, let me just finish this up really, very quickly. And thankfully, I've managed to calm down since the first time you told me, because I was pretty angry when I first heard about this, only in the sense that the fix being, you can increase the MMCSS thread limit. Now, this is something that they crossed their arms and pretty much just dismissed at the time, right? We're not applying that patch. It's bullshit, right? Well, they didn't say that, but that's what I felt. They just crossed their arms and said, this is not a solution that we're going to go down, and they went down that rabbit warren, and I'm not going to cover it again because it's ad infinitum, right? So the changes that they made in the audio engine, we are still navigating the bullshit that they've actually introduced there, right? The other DAW developers in their own way, have actually been able to manage the MMCSS thread limits. Some of them are probably playing by the rules a little bit better, Pete, I would say, right? Because
I have no idea, honestly.
Well, I don't think they've been impacted at the same level.
They might not even be using them. They might have just other thread management stuff that works well for them.
Yeah. Well, I know that Reaper actually uses some MMCSS, but I'm pretty sure that
does it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Justin, we covered this. He just I think he's using the thread pool because the MMCSS was never a problem with Reaper, right?
Yeah.
It could have been with Studio One. We don't, you don't know because that kind of manifests with all these different kind of anomalies, especially once your core counts come up. And that's why I suspect that some of the other DAW was circumnavigating some of this. We know the Cakewalk was circumnavigated because we gave them the patch back in the day, and some of the other DAW developers have actually asked for the patch and we've given it to them, right? So it's not a problem. It works. The reason it's not permanent is that when you do an update, it sees it as rogue and it actually overwrites it and you've got to write it in again. Now, I had a registry patch for that. Now, I'm just going to finish on this. Now, Steinberg are now offering, and now this article is not easily found. You can't go to your knowledge base there and find this. You need the link, Pete. I'm telling you, right? So I'm going, I have never seen this. And then you sent me the link. I went, what the fuck? I can't find this in their knowledge base, right? So it's pretty deeply hidden. But they actually wrote an app, right?
Yeah, I think I found it just with a regular internet search. So, I mean, it may just be that their knowledge base is
it's not easily found.
Not easily searched. Yeah.
Well, it's not easily found by their knowledge base. It's not something that's actually prominent. Right? It's not actually something that's prominent. So, but they've written a little app, that just, what's it do, Pete? Why don't you tell the listeners what it does?
I think it increases the MMCSS thread.
With a slider.
Like
I've gone, oh, wow. Yeah. Why didn't you actually give us that 5 years ago? I don't know. Anyway, so that's what I was angry about. I just said, thank you very much, and I'll take a bow. I'm sorry, but I will take a bow that actually vindicates what we did. That thing that we actually got across the line was valuable.
It is. It's still the wrong approach, but yeah.
Well, it's a Band-Aid, but that little app that they released 5 years after the fact could have been something they could have released in 2018. But, that's it.
They could have, but props to them for creating something that users can actually use to do this.
What was that?
That's the M-word timeout buzzer.
Oh.
Yep.
That's good.
You like that?
What the
scared the hell out of me. So probably thanks, Chris. I think I just shit myself over.
That was one of your synths. What was it?
No, it was actually my phone.
Oh, you prick.
So right. I have a question.
It's the Vint rant buzzer. Shut up.
It is, yeah. and it's likely to come back too.
Thanks.
That's okay. So just taking a few steps backwards here, with this new DAWbench multiple testing thing that we started on and then ranted off to Cubase.
Yep.
What were some of the other findings on the other DAWs, other than the fact that Cubase is causing some issues?
So the other DAWs, so we had Reaper, Studio One, and the last one was Traction Waveform, right?
Oh, cool.
And what we found, and also, and I will swing back to the 10980XE stuff because that was really interesting. Each of them have their own threading dynamic, right? Traction Waveform, believe it or not, was, and I was testing this at 512 because it was a mixing environment, right? And I left the hybrid engines on in Cubase and Studio One, and Reaper's a bit different with their AFX, but we'll call it their hybrid engine. The only DAW that Traction Waveform, which is running 100% in real time, the only DAW that it outperformed it was Reaper. So it was in that mix environment at 512 buffer, it was equally performing or outperforming Cubase and Studio One with their hybrid engines playing. And so they had massive playback buffers. One was running at 24 milliseconds, one was running at 33, 34, I think. So that's Cubase at 34. Studio One was running at 1024, so 24 milliseconds, right? And here we got a real-time engine running at that 12 millisecond, and it was performing equally. So that little engine, I've said this before, that waveform real-time engine is a little engine that it's actually
more than that.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that it's actually open source and it's actually available to other DAW developers and stuff. So, Jules and David, who are the two developers responsible for that's an amazing little engine. That's not saying that, and I'm recommending people all immediately just jump to traction waveforms. You can definitely have a look at it. I had some real difficulty getting around it because I'm so entrenched in navigating the other DAWs, but the engine itself I can't fault, right? And the reporting on that engine was the actual performance metering. It is amazing, right? So you've got your buffer, you've got your block buffer, and it's monitoring the thing in real time, and it'll tell you exactly when it underruns. Right, you've got your X run, your underrun reporting. Amazing. So that was kind of cool. I'll just quickly swing back to, I did a second mix session for a local client here. This is an older X299 10980XE. Now, these things are absolute workhorses for my composer clients, right? So when we're talking large numbers of virtual instrument samples, all the whole thing, these things are still rocking, right? But this client, there were some virtual instruments in there, but it was mostly audio, but there was a lot of bussing, and there's a lot of grouping and bussing. And this session on these style of sessions on this 10980XE, they were using, so you got 36, right, logical cores. It was using one mostly. Most of it was landing on one, right? And there was a trickle on maybe another 3 or 4. It was just ridiculous, right? So we were running like about 10, 12%, maybe even under 10% of the available CPU resources, and the ASIO guard was locked. It was the whole session was actually tipping over, and we were running a 2048 buffer and ASIO guard at the highest. Now that is totally against the premise of what the hybrid playback engine is supposed to be doing. Well, let's think about it, right? We couldn't go any higher on the interface, and we couldn't go any higher on the hybrid buffer, and it was running like 80 millisecond hybrid playback. ASIO guard was completely collapsing. We were using about 10 to 12% of the CPU resources. The thread management was an absolute basket case. And I'm thinking, okay, this is ridiculous. So I did exactly with his session. I said, send it over, template, I'll rebuild it here with my element, and then send it back and just check it, just that it's actually behaving the same on your system. So we did that, and we discovered a few things. Like one, it was working perfectly on the Intel hybrid machines, right? And my Intel hybrid development machine is only a little baby 6 core 12 thread and performance cores. It's only 6 performance cores, right? And it was running this thing. One, it was load balancing across better across the performance cores, but it was easily running this session where and I could run it at 128 samples. I could even run it at 64 actually with the hybrid playback engine running at standard, right? So there was a vast difference between what was going on between the hybrid CPU and the non-hybrid. And then I ran it across to Marcus over in the UK, and we ran it on the 7950, and it was load balancing again. It was ignoring the bottom 16, which is kind of typical kind of behavior we were seeing, but it was load balancing better across the first 16. So we're thinking, well, what the hell's going on with the 10980XE? So then I said, okay, let's do some experimentation here, and we went, let's knock out some cores out of the 10980XE. So I went back to 32. And again, this is all kind of starting to line up with what Cubase is doing because of the number of logical cores, right? It's saying MMCSS thread to logical cores. So we dropped it back to 32, and I'm going to post all the screenshots. Are going to, if I haven't posted them up, I will. The behavior between what it was doing with 36, which is over the total number of logical cores that could be applied to the MMCSS thread, back to 32, which was the maximum, and the behavior was different. Right, it was really choppy on the 32. And then we said, okay, let's go one step further. And I said, turn off the hyperthreading. And we went back to say it was 16 total threads. Guess what? It load balanced across the 16. The session still wouldn't run because it was too heavy, but I could see that the thread management all of a sudden had gone, I'm going to move it from 1 or 2 or just this absolute mess that was happening with 36 or 32 total logical cores back to 16 total cores, and all of a sudden it was perfectly load balancing across the 16. I don't know what that tells us, except that somehow the Cubase threading model is behaving differently across 3 different CPU architectures. And I don't even know how that's possible. Pete, can you help me here? How is that even possible?
You know, I honestly have no idea, Vin.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I thought when it comes to the thread management stuff, you've got your DAW, you've got a threading model, they're dealing with the task scheduling, and then it deals with the Windows, the task scheduler.
It's like multi-threading is, I've said this before, multi-threading is hard, and I don't even want to guess as to what's happening under the covers and all these different DAWs and how they allocate things, because the number of options and the number of things you can do is just so high, and all of those can impact how stuff gets scheduled on different cores, or like it, and they might even just have, limits on what they actually allocate. So, and this is no judgment on all the individual developers. I mean, some of them do better on some kinds of processors than others, but it's just, it kind of depends on what the history is and what they've done before and kind of what they're working with to start from.
Yeah, but I mean, just imagine the difficulty of trying to apply a threading model per CPU core type, because this is what it's feeling like to me. It's just, I don't understand. So with the AMD non-hybrids, I can, again, this is me stepping back and not at a code level, I can see what they've done. I can see that they've actually applied an Intel hybrid threading model onto the AMD incorrectly. That's what they've done. Right?
Maybe. Like,
well, that's what it looks like to me.
That, right? Because it may also just be that the way they've allocated their stuff, that they know that they can count on evens to do this and all. I guess that's kind of the same thing, but it's maybe they've optimized for one versus the other.
But how could they possibly be actually applying a threading model to the task scheduler where it's saying ignore the top 16? This is the thing that gets me, right? And you should see what it does on the larger thread rip. We're going to get to it, but I mean, on the larger thread rippers, it's kind of almost comical. It doesn't know what it's doing, right? So there is something going on there. Reaper just sits there and load balances across whatever, it just threads to it. Studio One is kind of it's another odd bird, Chris. That one there is not mirroring what Steinberg are doing, but it's closer to what Steinberg is doing than what Reaper is doing. And Traction Waveform just threads as we expected it to. So that was an interesting one. And that experiment with the 10980XE kind of just set me on my ass, because I'm thinking, check this out. I'm sitting there changing the number of cores, and it is literally changing the way that the thread management is applying the load via the task scheduler. And again, we're talking Windows 10. We're not talking, there's no thread director or anything like that going. We're talking Windows 10. And it went from like 1 or 2 cores being loaded to there's just this perfect load balance. Now, I think I've sent you the screenshots on that. I'm going to close off on that report. I don't know what the answer is.
Vin, ultimately, it's the results are what you're going to be dealing with anyway. So I it's not like we shouldn't be passing judgment or trying to imagine what they're doing behind the scenes. It's like You test these two DAWs. One performs better on this processor than the other. You let the people know that, hey, yours doesn't perform very well on this, and what they do with that is kind of their business. It's ultimately up to the market to decide if they want this DAW or that DAW based on the data you've produced.
Yeah. Well, look, in the end, I'm trying to wrap my head around how can there be just such different dynamics to the way that is actually thread managing, right? So that's the key takeaway here. I'm not understanding how you could possibly be changing the way that the threading is being applied depending on the number of cores and the actual family of CPU architecture. I don't know how they're actually managing to do that.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said, it may just appear that way to us, but that's not really, like, there may be a long chain of events that results in that as an end result versus some code that actually says do X when it's X processor and do Y when it's Y.
But this is an observational thing, Pete. That's all I've got.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And
Totally
it's not only observational, it's actually the end result, because I'm getting more and more clients actually complaining about this type of odd thread management. And it's not only the thread management, it's also the ASIO guard collapsing prematurely. Now, again, I'm not open to being able to discuss what Steinberg's response. I've had passed on by a third party who has had direct communication. They have worked closely with them while we've been doing this testing. We've been sending the sessions to them. They're fully aware of what we're actually encountering. And first there was, an arm cross going, no, we're not seeing this. And then they were kind of referencing just empirical testing, like, the Cubase test that Dom Segalis and the guys at Scan had actually produced. I'm thinking, why are you throwing that back at us? I mean, we've got DAWbench. I mean, we can easily mimic a core saturation load test. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about these real world sessions with these mix environments that are actually collapsing prematurely. They finally, and I've got to be real careful here. They finally come back and they've acknowledged it, and the response is that there's no fix for it. All right, I'm not going to go into any detail. Right? There's no fix for it currently. That the ASIO guard prematurely overloading, and there's just saying, in those session logistic environments, maybe you should try freezing. I'm like, okay, so this is where I've closed off. I said, you know what, I've put 6 months into this with Marcus, and that's the response. The audio engine team saying we don't have a solution for this, or maybe we don't have an easy solution for this. Try freezing your tracks. That client that has been impacted the hardest with this. The local client has been impacted the hardest. He's doing his mixing in Studio One now, because he can't operate in Cubase at the level that he wants to. And this is a long-term Cubase user. Is just saying, well, I can't complete my mixes. So I'm going to start using something else, at least for my mixing. I don't know. Anyway, that's it. Before the alarm goes off again.
That's right.
Good one. Hey, now let's just move on real quickly. DAW and Tech Release Roundup acquisitions and fallouts. Now, Pete, you're going to be very happy to know that I don't really have anything regards acquisitions this show, unless Chris knows of any that I've missed.
No public ones anyway, no.
I'm glad to see that slow down a little bit after the rapid buy-up.
That's because everyone's already bought everyone up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had something locally that myself and Chris are aware of, and but it's not really of interest to the larger listening audience, so we're not going to really cover that. But, there has been some, local buy-ups of, people.
Then you buying another RC card does not count.
Yeah, good one. Smarty pants. I've actually put them on the shelf at the moment, but we will get back to that.
They just need winter tires. It's all good.
Yeah, well, they are all winter tires. Now, see, now you're getting sidetracked. I will mention two things though, and you weren't even aware of this one, but Sam Ash closures.
Yeah, I was surprised.
42 brick and mortar stores in America. Now, any of us that have been to America, I don't know if, Chris, have you ever been to the Sam Ash stores? I used to call them Stand Cash.
Yeah, many times.
So they were kind of, for people that are not familiar, is that Sam Ash, they'd been around since about the 20s, I believe. It was a family-owned business. They had 42 brick and mortar stores. I remember when I was living in LA, they were the direct competitor to Guitar Center, right? So there was a Guitar Center, and then almost directly across the road and up a little bit. Remember, you know that store on Sunset,
yep.
Chris and Pete? Yeah. I actually liked them a little bit more. They're a little bit more friendly and family-orientated.
Well, they're a bit more family-orientated.
Yeah, family-orientated, yeah.
There was that feel, yeah.
Yeah. So I actually like the Sam Ash stores. That's very sad. So they've reached the point where they've just said, you know what, we've had enough, and they're closing the 42 stores. So that would be impacting a whole stack of employees and stuff. So that's quite sad.
Employees that actually knew a thing or two about how to make music on stuff, as opposed to the employees at some other places.
Yeah. Look, Guitar Center was the other more obvious one. And I've got to tell you, the last time I was in the United States was in 2019, and I was, where was I? I think at that time I may have been in Anaheim. And there was this massive Guitar Center right there. And the wife and the kids just said, "Do you want to go in, Dad?" And I went, "You know what? No." I mean, there was not one part of me that went, I don't really want to go in there because I know what's going to happen. As soon as I get in there, I'm just going to get lynched. Hey, man, I'm just like, no, not going to do it. Didn't even want to have a look around the brick and mortar store. So that's how far I'm out of the scene. Guys, I just was not interested at all. But if it was the Sam Ash store, I probably would have gone in,
Yeah.
Now the other one, and again, it's only a really short one. Moog has ceased the Moog 1 manufacturing. Moog.
There
Sorry,
you go.
Moog. Moog has ceased the Moog 1 production in the United States. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the last thing that was being manufactured in the US?
I do believe so.
Which means all manufacturing in the US is now ceased.
Yeah, that would be a logical conclusion. I haven't seen that written anywhere, but it seems to be the case.
No, me either. I don't think that's actually written anywhere, but they moved premises, so they did shut their shop.
Yeah.
Because they had a shop where you could go and buy stuff that was also a bit of a museum, and they have moved. But I think the last time they said that was still going to be not maybe manufacture is not the right word, maybe assembled there or put together or final Q&A. But yeah, interesting one. And look, I think with their new ownership, who has a lot of experience in manufacturing, I think there's good things to come from this company. I think it's watch this space.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be able to manufacture some affordable, well, I don't want to say affordable, I mean some slightly cheaper product overseas that I think will be a bit more competitive. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the synthesizer that's been teased a couple of times this year, and then they never delivered on that, so it's kind of yawn at this point. But they just had another one of their little Mother 32 type modules at showcase in Berlin, I think, didn't they? Or at Messe. Oh, not Messe. What's the event that just happened?
Well, Messe's no longer.
Yeah, it's not Messe. That's but it's anyway. So they just announced like a module there, but I don't know. I've been expecting to see some other things and haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah. I try and stay on top of what's happening there, but look, I mean, the point that I was just making is that if they have stopped the manufacturing, that's just sad for the remaining employees that were there, and probably a sign of the times, guys, unfortunately. But like Chris said, that with the manufacturing overseas, that for the end user, there could be some. We
keep hearing from a lot of the manufacturers that we deal with that they're really struggling with the additional tariffs on part imports from China, or where they're sourcing their spare parts, and it really is affecting margins and builds very significantly. We've seen a lot of prices increase because of that, so that's not helping.
Right. Okay.
Superbooth is the show you were thinking about before.
Superbooth, thank you.
That's the one. Yeah. Okay. Have they had that?
Yes. Yeah, it's gone and done. Yeah.
In the UK, I think.
Right. Is that recent?
It was in May.
Right. Okay.
Because it's always right about the same time as the build event, and I always want to find an excuse to go to Super Booth, but I never can.
Right. I think there's another one coming up as well. There's another one coming up, I think, in Germany. Chris, do you know about that one?
No.
Okay.
No, I probably do, but
Oh no, Super Booth is not UK. That is Germany.
Berlin.
So
yeah.
I don't think there's another event coming up. Finn.
That's the biggest synth show. I think that's the hardcore.
Right. Okay. I thought there is one coming up because I've in communication with some industry people. They were saying that there was they were giving a talk at this upcoming show. So there is something, but I just can't remember the name of it. So obviously it's not overly important.
I mean, we had some similar news from Waldorf. I mean, Quantum Mark IIs, there's no more going to be made till next year.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's parts supply issues and costs and all sorts of stuff going on with some of these really boutique expensive products.
Right. Okay.
And there's just the general, you'd mentioned the retail issues and stuff before, Chris. I mean, there's just a general kind of a slump in this after it's like everybody bought all their music equipment during COVID, and then you get 3 years later and nobody has any money to buy anything at this point.
Yeah, synths have been hit the hardest. There's no question. If you ask around, it's very difficult to move synths right now. I think price point, luxury items for a lot of people, it's pretty hard yards.
So in China, it's pianos. Like the piano industry has been hit over there, but their electronic music is growing a bit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But their piano industry has like taken an enormous hit.
The acoustic pianos, you mean?
Acoustic / electronic. I guess
pianos as well.
Pianos of all sorts, from what I understand. What we would consider to be a luxury item. So not, the cheap Casio or something that's, and I don't mean all Casios are cheap, but the cheap one that you would put out for the kids to practice on.
Yeah.
But the nicer stuff.
It's an interesting product, the piano, though, isn't it? Because you sort of buy a piano and you're not really looking to buy another one anytime soon.
Yeah.
Where you buy synths all the time. Well some people buy.
Especially an acoustic piano. I mean, you buy an acoustic piano, but it's a nice one. It's a lifetime purchase. Yeah.
You sell it with the house because you don't want to move.
You can't move it again.
You can't be bothered. Yeah.
You got to take out a wall to move it.
I've seen some hard rubbish days where they've actually wheeled out, upright pianos. And,
Grandma's piano.
Yeah, grandma's piano. And, oh, man, if I had the room, I'd grab them, And then the rain comes and that's the end of them, Yeah.
Grandma's wet piano.
Wet piano. Yeah, could you imagine retuning that baby?
There's no chance, no.
That'd be a great album title, Chris.
What, Grandma's wet piano?
Yeah, Grandma's wet piano. I love it.
We'll put that one on reserve.
Oh, God. Okay. All right, moving on. There hasn't been a lot of software new releases. Now, Ableton 12 was finally released, and I think the last time we spoke, it was kind of in beta, but so that's finally been released, and there's, some new what are we looking at here? Some MIDI tools, plugins, synths, just the usual type of thing. Cakewalk Sonar, return and release, Pete. Then that's an interesting one because I've kind of been monitoring what's been going on there, and we haven't spoken to Noel for quite a few years, but they've finally released Cakewalk Sonar. Now, initially it was going to be, this is going to be a paid professional release. It's not, away from the free version that they had all those years. And then they've gone, well, you need a BandLab membership subscription only. I've gone, okay, all right. Well, I'm not really interested in actually navigating that kind of area. I don't know, Pete. Did you know anything about that at all?
So no, but I mean, it's a pretty logical conclusion to assume that they would eventually be rolled into the larger family of products there. I mean, you can't have something free sort of hanging off the side out of the goodness of your heart forever and still be a business, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So,
but I mean, so you release a professional DAW product, or you re-release a professional DAW product, but just say, well, the only way you can access it is this way. I saw the reaction from the Cakewalk fraternity.
Well, a lot of them are left.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
I mean, like maybe they're trying to, so there are a lot of ways of looking at that. It could be that because this is the high-end product of the line of things that BandLab has, that they're trying to, give people an option there that lets them pull all their stuff over that they've been working on their phone and everything into kind of an air quotes pro product as all kind of the same ecosystem. I don't know if that's ultimately what's happening here, but it feels like, I mean, honestly, it feels like the right move for them. And a lot of companies have moved to subscription models. You know, love them or hate them. It's kind of, if you want to do business these days and be able to have funding to actually create new features and not have to pay for a massive sales push every year when you put out things, then that's kind of subscriptions where it's at.
Yeah. And look, Presonus have got a subscription model, and they kind of ran into a bit of trouble when, was it 6.5, Chris?
It's a hybrid subscription model. We need to get that technically correct.
Yeah, geez, that was badly presented.
Well, they announced it at the same time as an updated version. That was kind of a bit silly.
Yeah, I think it was just a miscommunication. Again, all the end users are losing their shit over again. What
Yeah,
the
and
fuck?
it ended up that after your subscription had finished, they gave you the free version of what you had to start with anyway. So it was actually a good deal. It just wasn't communicated very well.
Yeah, you get a perpetual license. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, calm the fuck down, everyone.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one. I think that as soon as end users hear subscription, all of a sudden there's this knee-jerk reaction. I think that's, and I think they've just got to communicate it a little bit better. Now, I did miss with the DAWbench thing because I did ignore the alarm and got sidetracked a bit. But I did want to mention real quickly with my other project on that side was the low latency performance database, and this is segueing into a new product, and this was the quantum audio interface release, Chris. Now, you and I have been communicating, and we've been very close to this, and I remember when I first heard of them using the quantum branding on a USB interface. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but I was like, I don't know if that's exactly a good idea. And the response from the end users, let's just say the existing Quantum Thunderbolt users are a unique bunch. They're very, very passionate and they love the device, and they've been the most vocal. Chris, I don't know if you've been picking up on any of that, but they were the most vocal about the units maintaining the Thunderbolt, the quantum branding.
The family name,
right? And I've been wanting to get in front of them. And now you sent me across one of the ESs, which was gratefully received, and I tested that up. And there was, let's just say, some teething problems with the first series of drivers where there was a kind of a really weird bug where it would add an additional 2 milliseconds and hard set that additional 2 milliseconds in round trip latency if you actually change the sample rate via their control panel. I'm like, what? And I only discovered that after the fact that I did a test and a report, and I've gone, God, I have to go back and do that report again, which I will happily. But I'm waiting for the HDs. And, what's been really good for you, Chris, is that these things are just like flying off the shelves. So I
heavily back ordered.
Yeah, I haven't even been able. You haven't even been able to get me a demo HD.
No, I haven't yet. No.
But what I do want to just cover really, really quickly is because of the Quantum family having the reputation of that low latency performance, this was always going to be a dangerous area that if they didn't deliver kind of similar performance. So, Presonus have said that they've got some custom drivers, custom low latency drivers, which you and I have had great discussion with. It's a Thesicon driver. So if they've tweaked it, cool. I haven't seen the benefit of it yet because it had that weird bug. I need to retest it all again. And the other interesting thing, Chris, is that the HD and the ES have a different driver. Were you aware of that? Well, it's listed as a different driver.
No, not really. I wasn't totally aware of a different driver. I mean, because to the naked eye, it's the universal control panel, so
yes,
you're not really
100%.
seeing. Yeah.
Yep. But when you tick Quantum USB, if you have a look in any of your DAWs or like in my RTL utility, there is a listing for the ES and there's a listing for the HD. So they actually are a separate driver. Now, I don't know why that would be. It probably maybe because of the family of converters. But that's an interesting one. And there's been some discussion, and some of it got pretty heated. I'm just wanting to kind of put a full stop on that one. And but it'll be interesting where the HD performance lands. Look, the performance isn't. It's not like you can't use the interfaces. I'm staring at a little Studio 24C that I've just finished configuring for a client, and it performs beautifully, right? It's just not at a quantum Thunderbolt level, right? So, and whether that actually impacts sales, you've already said that you're sold out, and the thing's just
it's not impacting sales one bit. But there are also different customers buying it. So I think the ones that are whinging don't buy anything, and everyone else is going, that interface looks okay.
Yeah. Or they were expecting something around that Thunderbolt performance, which was never really going to happen. But we'll see where it lands. Yeah. You know, I thought that was worth mentioning because there has been a lot of discussion since the release, and my LLP thread. I mean, the moderators had to go in and actually clean up a whole swathe of it. It got out of control. You missed that, Chris. It was out of control. I just went, wow, everyone just needs to take a breath.
The one positive thing that has happened in these interface releases is PreSonus had a lot of families of interfaces. You know, it had the audio box, the i2 Studio, there was like 1 million different versions, and none of them were particularly a family.
Yep.
And I think what's sort of happened here is they've grouped them together and gone, well, we do want a family of interfaces. Now, having said that, all the other quantum interfaces are no longer available anyway.
Yep, they're gone. Yep.
So probably just a marketing department sort of going, well, let's stick to this family. But yeah, look, I can understand if you own the Thunderbolt version. I don't think you can assume that they're going to be the same knowing that it's a USB interface, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we've got to get on with making music rather than complaining all the time.
Yeah, of course. And look, and the other interesting thing that with the USB, you know, and I've noticed that in some of the in the marketing speak, so to speak, with some of the reps, is that not you, but some of the commentators on YouTube, where they'll say it's a USB-C interface. I've gone, no, it's a USB-C connector.
Right.
It's a USB 2 interface.
Yeah, everybody's doing that.
Yes.
I don't look, I hate it. I don't like the fact that, because the problem is on most motherboards, on most computers, the USB-C connector with a USB-C is always going to be a 3.0, 3.1 or higher. And we know all these interfaces, it doesn't matter what brand you talk about, they're all USB 2 host interfaces. That's not an unknown thing. I don't really understand why they want to do that. I think it's a marketing thing, you know, especially on a MacBook, you know, especially when you've got all these USB ports, C ports. I think everyone's just like, well, let's just make it all easy to connect. But it comes with a bunch of problems, really.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing with the ES is that the USB-C aspect it was a power requirement because there's more power that can be delivered via USB-C. In most cases, and I'm going to be very detailed here, in most cases, the units will not power, the ES units will not power if you're using a USB-C to a USB 3 or a USB 2 port on your machine, on the system. Yep. There's not enough power. You have to actually run some additional power, auxiliary power, and that has to actually be USB-C as well. So if you've got a phone charger, for example, that is USB 2 to a USB-C, that still didn't deliver enough power. I mean, I had to actually buy a pretty hefty USB-C power brick, remember, Chris? I mean, I was discussing this with you, going, I can't get this thing to turn on.
Yeah, we did. We talked about this a lot. And funnily enough, all the ones that have gone out into the wild, we haven't had a single phone call. So I don't know if they've worked that out or they've just plugged it into something where it's worked first time. It's always a bit of an interesting one. Yeah.
Well, look, the Mac laptops are probably supplying enough power. USB-C ports on most motherboards will probably be supplying enough power. You know what the problem is there, though? That there's the USB-C ports on a lot of motherboards are not native. They're actually, as media or something like that. And that's kind of like, you don't want to go plug in your interface in that. So there is a little bit of, minefieldy type of stuff to navigate. look, I know what the solution is. So if I've got a client that wants one of these ES units, and I'll be saying, don't plug it into the USB-C port on the motherboard unless it's native. You need one of these bricks. It's $30. You know, it's $30 on top, but it's $30, and I know the solution. You know, the thing that was also discovered as well is that you know, just plugging into a USB-C port on a system doesn't necessarily supply enough power. So I think you know, people were discovering like some of the OEM Windows laptops don't supply enough. They don't supply enough power via the USB-C. Right. So
yes, power hungry units. Big converters, big preamps.
Yeah.
It's just a confusion from everybody requiring the same connector now. And I think because didn't the EU go pass some ruling about requiring USB-C for the power for laptops or phones or something like that? But
yeah,
everybody's standardizing on it. But like I have a keyboard here that I'm not going to say who creates it, but it has separate USB-C inputs on the back, but one of them is power only and one of them is for is for the actual data. And like it's not clearly marked, like you have to hold the light up to it at just the right angle and stuff. That drives me nuts.
Yeah, well, it's exactly the same with the ES. There's two USB-C ports at the back. One's an auxiliary. You know,
most of your clients should be buying the HDs anyway.
Correct, 100%. Because I remember the first question I asked you when I said, Chris, please tell me that the HD is not bus powered. And you said it's not bus powered. And I went,
no,
thank you
comes
very
the big
much.
ass power supply.
Yeah, very, very good. Awesome. Okay, so just real quick, emerging tech, MIDI 2. Pete, have you got anything to report there, or is it just kind of like heads down, ass up, and eyes forward?
I wouldn't put it quite that way, Vin. God, the image. No, you're gonna need some bleach after that.
So there's a few devices now selling that are fully supporting MIDI 2, which is awesome.
Right. So the Montage Yamaha just released the firmware, the official firmware for the Montage that has MIDI 2 support. I can finally talk about what I have here. I've had that Montage since last summer or something like that with beta firmware. It was one of the primary devices we used to test MIDI 2 support on that, and the Roland A88, which has proper support out there as well.
So who does the Montage, sorry?
Yamaha.
Yamaha. Oh, Yamaha.
Yep.
You probably said that and I missed it, sorry.
It's definitely a performer's workstation, so it doesn't really fit the types of things I do because I'm not really a performer, but it's quite a beast. I enjoyed it. But they have a really solid MIDI 2.0 implementation in there that we've been testing against. And then as far as our stuff goes, it's really just trying to get everything through all the right reviews and stuff so that we can get it in box near the end of the year here. And I'll actually have another developer preview out probably Thursday this week so that people can do that. Oh, and our USB driver just got code complete from the folks that are developing it. So that's certainly a milestone, and we have a bunch of additional testing to do on that, but I'm happy to see us finally hit that.
Yeah.
And did I see the Native Instruments Control, the third gen, are talking about being ready to go as well?
Yeah, so I've got one of those here that I actually purchased myself. That's the one with the two USB-C ports on the back. No worries at all. But I've got one here, and I've been using that. And last I looked, it was doing, I think it was MIDI 1 protocol over the new data format, the UMP data format. So that's also compliant and stuff as well. So yeah, they're starting to hit out there. There have also been a lot of devices that have taken sort of baby steps into MIDI 2.0 with what's called CI, which is the stuff that works over the existing transports and existing data formats, but gives you things like the lists of all the patches and synchronization between the keyboard and the DAW and stuff like that.
Yeah, very cool.
Oh, I miss the patch lists.
So it's getting there. What I'm being told by some companies is we need to get our ass in gear on the Microsoft side because they're kind of waiting for us to ship the stuff in box. So because Apple has it out there already in their devices, and
new version of Logic.
Yeah, Logic's got it all built in there and stuff as well. But we had to rebuild our stack from the ground up because it was positively ancient and couldn't couldn't do any of the things we needed to do. So we had a bit more of a runway before launch.
Well, we're getting closer.
Yeah.
Getting closer, Pete. That's going to be good.
Around the end of this year.
So are we going to have a MIDI 2 launch party?
That sounds like a really good idea. Let's pick some place that's hot but not too hot. I think you'd appreciate that.
Hawaii?
Yeah, Hawaii sounds good.
Okay. So are you shouting us to Hawaii, Pete? Thanks, man.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'll meet you all there.
Yeah. No. We'll
Yeah.
just we'll do Microsoft. We'll do a Microsoft launch party, and he can fly in all of the delegates. You just got to sneak me. You got to sneak me into the delegate list somehow, Pete.
Qualcomm has an event in there in October. That sounds like a good event for me.
Oh, can you sneak me onto that list?
Vin,
Yeah,
for
no
people
is
who've
the
met
answer.
Vin, I could actually fit you in the carry-on anyway, Vin, so it's all good.
Fucking comedian.
Classic.
Good one. Right. Hey, and everyone's favorite subject coming up, AI. Fuck. I mean, every time we bring this up, everyone kind of just goes, oh, shit, really? Fucking.
You know what I reckon we should do?
What?
We should do a show where everyone goes and tests some part of AI in some piece of software that's out, comes back and reports it.
Well, I mean, I use AI in every show, all right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, mate, there was a show between the last TechBytes and this one where, mate, I was removing, and Pete's going to laugh, but, mate, I was removing everything from cats jumping up on desks, right, to fucking trains going past every 3 to 5 minutes. Trains. I'm like going, you've got to be kidding. So
That was kidding.
yeah, mate, trains. And we're just like, because right in the middle of it, Pete's going, he goes, mate, I've got to ask, what the fuck's going on with the trains? So the guest lived next to a train line, and he goes, oh,
I don't hear them anymore.
yeah, he said, I find it relaxing. I've gone,
Yeah.
right, no worries. Trust me, it wasn't relaxing for me and Pete because we're in the middle of a conversation. We're bloody trains go literally every 3 to 5 minutes.
Vin makes it sound like freaking Thomas the Tank Engine
Thomas the
going
Tank
by
Engine.
outside.
Yes, sorry.
No, they were proper trains going by. He was such a great guest, though, that we're willing to put up with the train stuff.
Yeah, we're not going to name it because the people, the listeners can try
but
and
he'll
guess.
know.
Yeah, he knows. Yeah. I mean, he in one of the emails, he literally just said, how the fuck did you fix that? Well, it's called AI,
And it'll get rid of the birds from, was it Chris's background that I hear every so often, or maybe it's yours, Vin?
I think I just heard birds again in Chris again.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Yeah,
thanks.
Well, the sun's coming up.
There you go.
If Chris has got
The birds are waking.
Yeah, well, lucky the ha-ha pigeons haven't fired up near my place. And you're going, what the fuck's a ha-ha pigeon?
That's a different story for another time.
The ha-ha pigeon is my old dad used
I like
to
how
call
Chris
kookaburras.
keeps trying to keep you on track.
Yeah,
It's
sorry.
not working, is it, Pete?
Nah,
No.
The good old kookaburras, a ha-ha pigeon. All right, so where were we? AI, yes. Well, you guys got me sidetracked. All right, so
I don't think we did.
Oh,
You
no,
did?
no.
all right. So the AI stuff that I really want to talk about is generative versus creative, and especially the ethical side of it. So what has really kind of emerged since our last TechBytes show was that I was initially saying, I still haven't heard a song start to finish, and then we started seeing the video stuff, and then we were starting to see the song stuff. Now, there's two major ones. Udio and Sozo are the ones that have got the greatest attention and kind of causing most of the angst. There's probably others kind of popping up, but these guys, I mean, you can go and text the prompt and get something almost scary good at the other end within 2 or 3 minutes with very minimal subscription. I think it's $10 a month or something. It's just kind of, or $10 gets you 50 songs or something. It's pretty minimal. Now the thing for me, and I've always maintained, was that, how did these things get so good? They've got to be training on something, all right? And you're not going to be training on songs that they've written. They're going to be pooling from source material that's actually out there in the public domain, right? And I'm being very, very careful here, right? So there's always going to be the ethical question of, have they been training these models on copywritten material without permission, right? That's always been the question. Now, there's been some people that have been doing some great investigations on this stuff, and I'll just paraphrase one, right? And I read an article where the guy had the subscription. I can't remember which one of those two, whether it was Udio or Sozo, but the prompt was, you ready? 70s Eurovision-style pop song about a young girl who likes to dance and wants to feel like a queen. All right? That was the prompt. You're chuckling. What do you think it popped out at the other end?
Dancing Queen.
Yeah, it popped out Dancing Queen. But not only to the point where the lyrics were almost word for word, and the music may as well have been, there was a few slight variations, but it popped out Dancing Queen. Now, that's not an accident, and it's not a coincidence. That is clearly showing that they were training on copywritten material. Now,
Copyrighted.
Sorry?
Copyrighted, not copywritten. Just throw that out there for you, Van.
Oh, fuck. And here comes the body of the what do you call it? The grammar Nazi. Thanks, man.
Oh, you're welcome.
So what was it?
Copyrighted.
Copyrighted.
See, copywritten is what you get done for a book.
Right.
Like it's somebody who writes the copy.
Okay. All right. Copyright.
Hey, so now that I've distracted you.
Yes. Time to move on.
Yeah. Isn't one of these two.
It's not time to move on, Chris.
Didn't one of these two put out a blog post saying that they were paying the artists or something that they trained on? Like I thought one of them was you had to submit.
No.
What am I thinking of?
Actually, I know what you're talking about. These guys, I read an interview. Mate, they're basically venture capitalist funded tech bros, right? Probably with those fantastic sneakers, Pete, right? They don't give a fuck about musicians. None of them are musicians, right? They saw the opportunity and they have been stealing in earnest. I'm sorry, right? Because it's pretty obvious exactly what they've been doing, right? And one of them actually even said, he says, we're expecting to be sued, right? And I'm like, yeah, you're too right you are, because the three major labels are going, fuck you. Where now there's lawsuits in place. The three major labels in collaboration are going after these two, right? And it's pretty obvious. Look, you can't spit out Dancing Queen from a prompt like that by accident, right? So that's going to be interesting to watch. The other thing that was, and I'll make the point quickly, was that streaming service, and I don't care, it's Spotify, right? Because this is not me making the allegation. This is the stuff that I've been reading and with people who've been doing these investigations themselves. And with Spotify, the allegation always was that they were going to create their own catalog of virtual artists, so they didn't have to pay real artists, right? And one of the articles I was reading was there was a guy that he had a recommended generated playlist from Spotify, and over a period of a couple of weeks or so, he kept hearing the song repeating, which is pretty obvious, right? And not really untoward. You're going to have a repeat on the playlist, but then he noticed that the song itself, exact same song, was being listed as a different artist and a different song title, right? And then he just started paying more attention, and then he realized that the same song was being played, I think he said 30 to 40 different artist names. And they were flooding recommended playlists with this. Obviously, this artist was a virtualized artist, right? So they're flooding their own playlist with AI generated stuff, so that they're pulling the stream revenue away from the real artists. That's pretty. I can't. The ethic on that really grates on me.
There is a flip side though, and I think the flip side is if you type anything in, I want a picture of 4 dogs smoking cigars around a poker table. I think it's pretty obvious what's going to come out the other end. But the problem is, not the problem, but at some point there is a stop to it, and that is that you're not going to get away with releasing a version of Dancing Queen trying to make money out of it without getting sued. And we know that that's in place. There are algorithms out there already from copyrighted material that go in and try and work out whether or not you've used variations of music to estimate whether you copied it or not. So I think it's going to fall on its ass at some point.
Yep.
The other part, and as a bit of a lead in here, is my version of Logic updated to version 11 in May or whatever it was, the new version. And it has some AI built into it that is in the form of session players, right? So I'm not in Logic a lot, but I seem to be when I'm sort of helping people with some support bits and pieces. But it has a different angle, and that is that you can run in these session players that are generating AI into various styles of playing depending on the music that you're creating. So there is this other element that we've spoken about before, which is it is a helpful tool. Now, you're not going to so much run into copyright issues using a plugin like that in Logic when it's trying to, work out what it is that you're creating on the fly. But there is certainly a problem with some of this other stuff generating music that's already out there. I just wonder how long before they get shut down and you're not going to get away with it. I just don't see how that's going to be really a drama.
No, and this was the this was a light at the end of the tunnel for me, and I've had this conversation with a few of my friends in the industry because they've gone into panic. Library music or music for ads or any of that kind of shorter incidental type of music, it's gone. That could be completely devastated. And there's some pretty hysterical and panicked commentators on YouTube about this stuff.
Where this is leading is that somebody needs to write some AI to sit there and search away for anything that you've written to go and find if somebody else has copied it.
Yeah. Use AI. You use AI to find the AI
against itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting thing, and I guess the same thing's happening with photography. The same thing's happening with paintings. It's very wide, but yeah, it's not. It is. I think you've either got to use it as a tool and use it to your advantage, or just be very aware of what's going on. I mean, if you've got music out there that you've copyrighted and you're got out there that you're streaming and doing stuff with, yeah, I guess you've got to keep a bit of an eye whether that's been ripped off. But, there's the other thing too, which some of these platforms like iTunes and Spotify and all the others, they need to also step up and take some responsibility that that's not happening on their platforms.
Well, there's an easy kind of fix for that. They tag AI generated music as AI generated music. But then there's going to be this grey line about what if there's an AI generated voice, but all the rest of it is actually being created by a human. And there's
but there are specific rules around what is deemed as copied.
Yeah,
And
there's been many lawsuits across time that has dealt with that.
And I think the only thing that we can be sure of in this is that because if you look at who's suing here, it's the labels and stuff, and they generally don't ever take care of the musicians anyway. So I think the musicians get screwed in this no matter what.
Well, here's the interesting thing in the article that I read, Pete, and exactly on that point, all right, where they've said, and I think Nick Beato has got a great video explaining this.
Rick,
Sorry, Rick Beato. Awesome YouTube channel for anyone that wants to kind of venture across. And he, in one of the videos where he was saying, okay, the major labels have stepped up, they've gone killer. And he goes, yeah, but there's another angle on this, is that the major labels are now wanting to leverage AI themselves with their signed artists, and then you can actually hire, their copywritten material or their voice, or and you can then you're going to actually license it via AI so that you can use the voice of X, fill in blank here, right? So the record labels are going, hang on, we can't beat them, we're going to join them, but we're going to how we're going to leverage this ourselves with the artists that we have signed and with the copyrights that we actually own, and that's how they're going to do it. So the first impression was, hey, they're going to go protecting the artist. The second one is, yes and no, they're going to milk them as well.
Yeah, not a great track history of protecting the artist.
Yeah, they're going to milk it as well.
I've been looking actually at this article here while you were talking about it to see what prompts they're typing.
Yeah.
And they are super specific prompts. One of them actually says Mariah Carey in the prompt. It says Mariah Carey. So here's the prompt that they did. Mariah Carey, contemporary R&B, holiday Grammy Award winning American singer songwriter, remarkable vocal range, and it generated something like All I Want for Christmas Is You. And then most of the other ones, it generated, if I'm looking at the timestamps here, it says, oh, the timestamp for the one that sounds like the Beatles, it's only the 6 seconds from this part to this part. So like saying it completely generated something can be a stretch in some places, but it is still clearly a problem.
Yeah.
But some of these prompts are like, seriously, I could give these prompts to a person and they would generate
generate Dancing Queen. Well, look, the thing is that maybe they're getting smarter and they're actually pulling back, right? Because I think there was some instances where it was so blatantly obvious that they just completely ripped it start to finish, you know. So maybe they're just getting smarter, you know. They're getting smarter to cover their tracks.
And this is all part of a lawsuit because apparently they did train on all this stuff without rights. I thought for sure I was reading about something that they paid the artists for the training, but that's clearly not this.
No.
And I hate the idea of the labels owning the voice. I mean, I know the songs are copyrighted, but like the label owning the voice of that person and then being able to just produce a bunch of stuff using that person, that's just such a mess.
You know, that's another lawsuit on top of another lawsuit, I think.
Yeah, but good luck.
Yeah, it's just going to be way more Taylor Swifts around. Just go and try and own your own music for that exact reason.
Yeah. Really? Do we really need any more Taylor Swifts?
Hey, she's really popular for a reason.
Well, here's
not reasons I necessarily agree with, but
but hang on a second here, because look, I'm no Taylor Swift fan, but I do applaud her for trying to own her music and doing her own thing.
Yeah, same,
because 100% that's what needs to happen. So she can make as much money as she wants out of that. Good on her. But she's given the studios a bit of the finger. Yeah,
look, I've got no opinion either or on that. I'm just, I'm not a avid listener of her musical output.
Oh, I've got a 13-year-old here that doesn't listen to anything else.
Yes, so. I know.
No, nobody in my house listens to her, but I think she's fine.
There you go.
I don't listen to her either.
All right, so we can sign off on Tay-Tay.
Yeah, she's fine.
Tick.
Right.
I do think it's a great idea, though, like to double down on what Chris said. I think it's a great idea that these musicians start owning their own stuff. The labels have been, I don't want to say irrelevant, but they have been largely irrelevant for a while.
Long time.
They just eat so much of what the musicians need.
Yeah, a long time. And the thing is that the look, there's plenty of artists that are doing quite well without any label support whatsoever. They might have a distribution deal or whatever else, but it's a different world, you know.
Distributions. Well, it's not easier, but it's certainly more accessible than it used to be.
Yeah. And look, and you've got the electronic content delivery as well. So, that's a whole other show. But as far as the AI side of things, I was happy to see that the record labels at least stepped up and going, hey, I think you've been stealing our stuff.
Yeah, they are providing a value there.
Yeah, I think you've been stealing our stuff, so we're going to push back, and and the three have joined together. So there's plenty of money there to go after these guys, and I'd like to see some of these guys with their ass handed to them, to be quite honest, because they really pissed me off in some of those interviews that I read. So we
are going to see in the next 6 to 12 months a lot more AI integration built into DAWs that are not just plugins. So we will, it'll be interesting space. Wonder which cores they're going to land on.
Yeah, well, we'll see. There's AI powered DAWs as well. I haven't really looked far enough into
the session
them.
player thing in Logic is actually really interesting.
Yeah, but I mean that's actually playing off what you've actually played in, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there's another company that's actually kind of marketing that as well. But
it's still generative though, Vin. It's just not. It's just trained on other things.
Yeah. The more I looked into it, the kind of less comfortable I got with it. So I'm just going to leave it at that. But it is going to be interesting. It is going to be more and more. I think it is going to be hitting the DAWs more. I like it. in the plugins and the analysis, analytical type of things, and the restoration stuff, and that generating phrases and that type of stuff. Maybe we've had automatic programs generating phrases and stuff for ages, but they didn't really usually
integrate very well.
Yeah, well, I didn't really use what you were playing and then triggering off that. So that's I think could be a creative side of stuff, which could be interesting. So again, it's watch this space. The last conversation we had, we were kind of almost chuckling at what they were outputting in regards to song start to finish, and that kind of changed very, very quickly. I'm not chuckling anymore. So who knows where it's going to be in 12 months.
I encourage anybody who's interested in AI gen stuff to go watch. It'll be easy enough to find, but there's a AI generated gymnast video.
You sent me that link.
It's freaking brilliant. Like, uncanny AI is the best AI. I think that's awesome.
Chris, I'll send you that link.
Haven't seen that one, no.
Or even Pete can send you that link. Let me tell you, it's not impressive at all.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
that was folding space time in that one. It's lovely.
Yeah, we discussed the woman walking in Tokyo with the neon lights and stuff. With the only way we could pick it was the feet crossed over. This is not in the same league, Chris.
There's no subtlety here.
No, there's no subtlety. It's just pretty bad, but that was pretty funny. You actually that gave me a chuckle when you showed me that one yesterday, Pete. Okay, let's move on real quick. Look, the continuing platform and CPU wars. We could, again, I'm not going to go down into a rant about the Windows Mac type of dynamic there. There is definitely, we've discussed this. There is definitely a move towards Mac since the Apple Silicon, and we need to kind of. When I say we, myself and Pete and anyone on the Windows side, we need to kind of find some kind of way to kind of rebalance that a little bit.
You could purchase yourself a Mac.
Yeah, thanks. With the Mac side of things, M3, M4, I'm not sure how far away M4 is. I mean, these are all kind of like incremental type of improvements. I don't know what kind of numbers they're actually claiming on the.
It's getting very confusing. I mean, I was had a customer the other week saying, which one should I buy? And I'm like, let's have a bit of a look. But even things like when you're looking at Mac Minis and, they're automatically getting M2 Pro upgrades from previous versions, and suddenly that's the 2024 version. And you're like, when did that happen?
Yeah. So what's running the M3s, the laptops?
The M3 Maxes and Pros that have coming out in a few of the Mac Airs that have just come out.
Right.
But the M2 Ultra is still leading the chase. That's the one where the Geekbench tests are still very high, and that's what's in the Mac Pro.
That's in the Mac Pros, right.
Yeah. But, they're also like $20,000. I mean, we're not talking about anything cheap here or to get an M2 Ultra machine.
Yeah.
But they're incremental updates. I read this article in Macworld the other day. And I think all they're really highlighting is that since that original processor, they have managed to scale up and scale up and scale up almost yearly or every monthly. But what is particularly interesting on the photography, video, render side is that there's massive performances to be gained in those softwares. I don't think we're just seeing that on the DAW side. So it's a bit sad, I reckon.
No, but and this comes down to the threading side of things as well.
Yeah, right? It does.
It comes down to the threading things as well. So look, I'm glad that you're my Apple man. Well, actually, Marcus is also he's like you, very much like you.
I like both. I've got plenty of PCs here. I've got my X299 machine here. Don't worry.
Yeah, Marcus is platform agnostic as well. He's got Apple Silicon and X86.
I wouldn't do video or photography work on anything other than a Mac Silicon right now. You'd be kind of the performance is out of the world on that render side.
Yeah. Well, that's horses for courses, Chris, as always.
Correct.
So look, I'm I'm glad that you're actually. I'm not glad that you're confused, but it's interesting that being someone that's more au fait with the Mac side of things, that you're confused with what's going on with these.
Just too many models.
M2, 3, and now we've got M4 coming. Yeah. And you're right, it's incrementally, they're 10, 15% IPC and that type of stuff. But I don't know whether the clocks have been coming up and the core counts have kind of actually been shifting around. Some have got less in the M3 than the M2, and it's all over the place, right? So you're right, it is all over the place.
Yeah, on the Airs, I think the current generation they're running is really based around that so-called 18-hour battery life. So I think the newer stuff that's come out is really based on low voltage, high battery time on those laptops.
Yeah.
I don't know about 18 hours. That seems a bit far-stretched. I don't know if anyone's actually tested that. Probably someone should.
Yeah. This is not what we're really kind of interested in focused in.
No.
So that's kind of the thing. And look, x86 is still there and it's coming for them, right? So I did mention the Lunar Lake and the Arrow Lake. Now, Lunar Lake, I'm fucking sick to death of these lakes, but Intel Lunar Lake is the new mobile processor that's about to hit in this quarter, and Arrow Lake S is the desktop variant. Now, I just want to really quickly cover that because there's some new architecture.
Suddenly AI 3000 isn't such a bad name.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but AI 3...
no lake.
But, buddy, the AI 3000 is their marketing name. For the Intels, it's Ultra, but, they've dropped the I's now. There's Ultra 5, Ultra 7. Jesus, Ultra pain in the ass. So these architectures are a significant shift, right? So this is, from my understanding, based on the Golden Cove, and the Golden Cove is the Jim Keller design chip, right? It's not the full Golden Cove, but we're heading into that kind of area, right? So there is a major architectural shift. Hyperthreading has been dropped, which is really interesting, right? But here's the one that kind of sat me on my ass, because this one kind of came out of left field because a lot of people weren't aware of this, is that you're back to 8 performance cores max, right? No hyperthreading. So all of a sudden you've got 8 threads, not 16, right? But the E cores, which were really just kind of there as a supplementary thing and to do the background tasks, they have had anywhere from 30 to 60% IPC improvement, depending on who you believe, right? And I've gone, I think it's actually closer to 60. I think it might even be closer to 70, right? Because now all of a sudden, those E cores have the same IPC as the current Raptor Lake, all right? Let me just repeat that. The E cores have the same IPC performance of the current Raptor Lake. They're a little bit down on clock, right? So they're not E cores. I mean, you can call them E cores all you want. They're not E cores. They're actually high performance cores, but running a little bit lower clock, right? So they've dropped the hyperthreading, but from my understanding, the thread director is now going to be integrating those E cores to work in conjunction with the P cores earlier, would probably be the best layman's way to say it, right? So instead of the core has to be complete, all of the cores have to be completely saturated for the E cores wake up. I think because of the increased performance on this, they're actually being implemented somehow earlier, right? So is that taking the place of hyperthreading? See, that's what the thing was called, rentable units. Now I remember I was talking about rentable units maybe last show or a couple of shows ago, and the rentable units is what's supposed to be replacing hyperthreading. Now my understanding is that rentable units has not been implemented in this next generation of chip, but all of a sudden you've got these E cores that are running at massive IPC instruction increases, performance increases. The performance cores are only reportedly 14 or 16%, but I think Intel are actually, I think they're sandbagging there because early reports are around 30. So the interesting thing for me is that now all of a sudden, where before it used to be more cores, now all of a sudden we're looking at 8 cores sans hyperthreading, right, with a huge IPC increase and the E cores with a massive IPC increase. How this is going to land for DAW usage is going to be really, really interesting, considering what I've been watching Cubase do at the moment, right? Where it actually looks like it actually performs better with a smaller number of cores. So that's going to be real interesting. They're not going to be out till September to November. There might be a paper launch or something, but that's going to be real interesting, right? So that's 15th gen, and I'm kind of got brackets, right? The other area was, I don't want to call it HEDT, but this is the Xeon and Threadripper area, right? And again, we're depending on a higher number of cores, and in the context of the discussion that we've been having today, it's kind of like, really? How is this going to kind of fare? So here's the interesting side. Xeon 2500, which was rumored to be coming out in February, March, get this, it has actually been released, but it hasn't hit the Intel channel. And you're going, well, what do you mean? Well, HP, Dell, Lenovo, they're offering workstation units with 25 and 3500 series Xeon CPU. So the refresh has actually happened, right? It's not available to us. It's not available in the normal channel. So
You mean you can't buy it like a CPU?
No.
And build your own?
Not even listed. Not even listed in Intel Arc, right? So they've gone and snuck out this refresh, right, that we all knew about, and it's not available in Intel Arc. So it may well be that refresh is not going to be made available publicly.
Or is it just that are those PCs actually shipping?
Yeah. Yeah, you can order them now.
Right, but are they shipping? Like, I'm wondering if they're not just pre-advertised or something.
I don't know if they're shipping. You can order them. Why would you bloody order them if they're not shipping? Why would they make them available for order if they're not shipping them?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a thing that happens all the time in different channels, but I don't know in this case.
Yeah. Look, I've been watching the Intel Arc, and I've been waiting for the Intel, dealer information and stuff, and none of us have heard a peep. First we heard it was going to be February, March, and then we heard it was going to be June, July, and hang on, June, July. They actually did. They hit that window, right, June, July. It didn't hit our channel. So I don't know. We'll keep watching. The improvement on that is not massive. There's an improved clock, IPC, improved clock, and the core count's gone up by 2. But we all knew about this stuff. It's just that it just hasn't hit the channel. Look, essentially that Xeon platform is dead in the water as far as I'm concerned. It has been dead in the water. Then AMD responded with their Threadripper non-pro, which again they classified as a HEDT. I don't classify any of these as HEDT, especially with the pricing. Now, when I say we, Pete over at Scan has been in front of these Threadrippers for the last good 3 or 4 months, and I was privy to the performance reports, and I'm not sure whether I mentioned in the last TechBytes, but I definitely have mentioned it in some of the other podcasts leading up, that these things, the initial performance stuff was that they were getting their ass handed to them by the Xeons with less cores, and I'm thinking, well, how could that possibly be? All right, they're the quad channel DDR5, high IPC, they've got the improved Zen architecture. So these things should be absolutely murdering it. We're thinking, well, what the hell's going on? And it ended up being, I think I kind of hinted that it was actually the memory performance on these. The only available ECC memory at the time that was qualified was 4800 megahertz, right, in quad channel array. And we're thinking, okay, well, is it going to be making that much of a difference? Because we've been running DDR5 on the Intel and AMD machines, and we know that there is some performance to be squeezed out if you run some faster memory module, but it's not massive, right? So Pete held off on the report because he's going, Vin, I'm going to hold off because they've actually upped the spec on these, and there's some faster memory modules coming in, and I'm going to wait till I get them. And they took quite a while to actually hit the channel. So Pete was kind of very wise to actually have held off, which I'll explain, because he got some 5600 memory running. He was trying to get some 6000, but it wouldn't qualify, it wouldn't work. So he's retested it 5600, and the report, by the time this podcast comes out, will be public, but I'm going to share some information on this, right? So between the 4800 and 56 memory on the DSP test, which is the DAWbench DSP with the plugin test, this is in repo, all in repo, there was only a 1 to 3% performance improvement. So he's like, oh, okay, really? When it comes to the virtual instrument stuff, and this is where there was some problems there especially with the low latency. So anything below 256, the units were not performing well, and at 64 they weren't performing at all. We were getting 0. We could not even press play on the session, and we're talking the session template is 16 virtual instrument tracks playing an orchestral piece, right? This thing should be killing it. Couldn't even run it, right? So at 64, we had some major problems. 128, it was starting to kind of come good. 256 and 512. Here's the difference. You ready? So 1 to 3% on DSP. Virtual instrument stuff at 256 is 30 to 40%. 30 to 40% improvement just between changing from 4800 to 5600. And at 512, it was 46 to 65% improvement just running faster memory modules. So
it's pretty significant.
Well, it was just getting absolutely choked. So I'm glad he actually held off. I wasn't expecting anything like that. But these things have woken up, right? And now they are actually hammering the Xeons on the VI test. This is in Reaper. The problem is, again, I don't know what they're working like in Studio One, but I know that in Cubase they just forget it. It looks at the number of cores and goes, I'm going to give you half if you're lucky. It is just all over the place, just scattered all over the place. And this is in Cubase, not in Reaper, right? So there's a caveat. I'm going to just say to the clients, yeah, that's great. Are you Cubase user? No, we can't go there. Not yet. All right. And I don't even know who to discuss this with, because Pete opened a line of conversation with Steinberg back when we saw that threading problem, and there's been crickets. So I don't think there's going to be a resolution there. So the good news is that those thread rippers inserting certain working scenarios, and depending on which DAW you use, could be absolute monsters. But then in other DAWs, you may as well just stick with the 7950 or the incoming 9000. All right. So this is the last. I'm going to just close off on the CPUs coming in. So AMD have the Ryzen 9000 coming, and they're actually being released this month, right? And again, it's just another incremental thing, right? The clock speeds will stay pretty much the same. IPC improvements anywhere from 15 to 30%, depending on which benchmark. I think for the content creation stuff that we're doing, it's probably going around 15 to 16%, which is going to be pretty nice, because I mean the 7950s are not exactly slouches, so that's good. How they're going to compete against the Intel 15th gen when it comes in is going to be the question, especially with this hybrid reshuffling, so to speak, and minus the hyperthreading. So there's still some life in the good old CPU wars, so to speak, and I'm kind of more interested in how they're going to push against the Apple chip more than against each other, to tell you the truth. Yeah. Thoughts?
So Vin, I have a correction you might want to fold in.
Sure, go.
So I looked up the Xeon stuff, the 2500 and whatnot, the leaks and everything, to confirm what I thought I had read before. But so the workstations aren't for sale. What happened is Dell had listed support for them in a BIOS, stuff for, right? So it kind of leaked the processors there. And I went and looked, and the one company that does list the processors for sale says that they're ordered on request, meaning so they're not out in channel yet.
Okay.
They're just kind of leaked at this point.
Okay. Thank you. That makes me feel a bit better, because the article that I wrote was pretty much that all of these OEMs had them available now. So there you go. Okay, well, it's good. Well, that's actually makes me feel a bit better that they're not kind of reserving them to the larger brands, and we're not going to get access to them. But
as far as we know, we still can't make that assumption there. But you're right; they're still not listed on the Intel site or anything like that yet.
No. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. Cool.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on the CPU side of things, guys?
Watch the ARM space. Not so much for other stuff, but
yeah. Look, the only reason I didn't actually include that is that, and
we talked about them already.
Yeah, I mean, what are they called? Dragon X, not Dragon X, Snapdragon X.
Snapdragon. Yep.
Look, the only reason I'm not including them at the moment is because I'm focusing on DAW performance stuff with them. Once that we get some more movement on DAWs on ARM, then we can start including them a little bit more. I think we can move on. I mean, we've got the in the trenches, tales from tech support. Chris, you got anything over the last 6 months that kind of pops up?
Oh, I've been giving myself some tech support, actually.
Okay.
So
is that a euphemism, Chris? Like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's kind of some weird one-liners kind of flying in this show today. Yep.
Anyway, so my NAS drives have peaked out, and I've been doing a bit of cleanup. I'm sort of sitting at about 40 terabytes of crapola. A lot of videos and weddings of families. I think I've done like 17 friends and family weddings on the side over time, and 40, 50 something on dance shows. And I just thought, it's time to clean this data up, So I've been wanting to open some of my older projects up. Well, what a nightmare. And the same thing happens indoors. I've literally had to have 4 different computers running with 4 versions of different OSs with 4 versions of different software, because things just don't open up in new versions. And it's really frustrating. So I had a bit of a tip out there for everyone. And what I've been doing over the last 12 months when I've been finishing projects, whether they're audio or video, is I've just been making a text file, and I've actually been making a note on which OS, what computer, what version of the software I did the editing in, what plugin versions I was using. Because when you're trying to reload older stuff, from 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, it's freaking impossible. It's really frustrating.
And this is video, or you're finding the same problem with audio?
No, same problem with audio. The audio problems are more versions of plugins.
Yes.
More of a problem, or if you do load something in, a Studio One in version 6, it'll try and translate it from your version 4 that you were running on, and often or not makes a mess of it. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, because obviously it's adapting to new features. I mean, it kind of reminds me of digital mixers when you do an upgrade to the firmware and you got show files. It tries to add all the pieces to your show files that appear in your new version of the firmware, but you haven't really used any of those features. So yeah, I've just been documenting that a little bit to try and open up, down the track some of those projects and move a few things off some hard drives. But yeah, I've ended up with 4 different things to open up all my projects back from, 10, 12 years ago.
Oh boy, okay.
And I've sort of mostly got it to work, and I've re-exported some stuff and put it on my Plex and sort of had it there as a bit of a go-to, because there's some stuff I hadn't seen for a little bit of time. But I think I just went through the process of forgetting how frustrating some things can be sometimes over time, when versions are just constantly being updated, and, certain bits of software won't load unless you're in certain versions of OSs, and it just does your head in a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, from only personal experience with older sessions, the only times I've run into problems, it's not going forward, it's going back. So for example, if you've got if I've got a session that's been made in, let's say, version 9 of Cubase, and I open it in 12 or 13 is not a problem. But if there's something saved in 13, I try and reopen it in 9.5, it kind of opens. The audio and everything's there, and the plugins and everything are there, but you try and grab a handle to do a fade or something, and it's like, what the hell are you doing, right? So I discovered that recently, actually.
So I had some really old Nuendo sessions, back from sort of Music Link days, Vin, and they won't load in the current versions.
They won't?
No.
Like what are we talking about? Like version 2 or 3?
Yeah, they don't load.
That's interesting, because I've actually done some porting for some clients from early Nuendo sessions.
But I think that the hiccup on them is the plugin alignment assignment from back then. I think a lot of those older plugins are probably what's causing the problem.
Yeah. But I do it in a couple of jumps. I'll go, say if it's Nuendo 3 or 4, I'll go to Cubase 9, which was the last of the pre-engine change, and then we'll move it from 9 to that. And I think if you do it in 2 jumps, it's kind of okay.
Works a bit better, yeah. But to run some of those old versions of DAWs, you can't run them on current OSs either, so you have to sort of go backwards there too.
Yeah.
Reauthorize your plugins and everything.
Yeah.
Well, half of the stuff doesn't reauthorize. I mean, half of the older versions of stuff, the authorization services are offline for quite a lot of companies. So unless you've sort of got a snapshot of what you were doing, you're in a bit of trouble.
Yeah. Hey, actually, I just remembered something. Remember a few, probably last show or a few shows ago, remember I brought up Acusonus? Remember that I had the plugin suite from Acusonus?
Yeah, it disappeared, right?
And the company got bought out by Meta, and I couldn't reactivate my plugins, and I was fuming, right? I'm thinking, it's
been a big year of fuming, hasn't it, for you? I mean, on average, probably once a week, I'd say.
Nah, mate, it's been a big 2 decades. Smart ass. Anyway, so we get to Acusonus, and I was having a conversation with Aaron, and in passing, he says, "You guys get this, Vin?" He goes, "I had an Acusonus. It wasn't one of the restoration plugins, but it was one of I can't remember what it was. It was like I remember. It was a plugin that can actually dismantle and separate drum loops. So you kick, snare, hi-hat, right? Very useful." He goes, "Get this. I reauthorized it." I went, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Mate, I went through the motions, put the serial number in, went to reauthorize it. Took a while. Sat there for a few minutes, but it reauthorized. I went, no way. So yeah, sure enough, right? I found my installers of my legitimate plugins, and this has been a good couple of years, I reckon.
Vin, are we hearing that this was all your fault? Is that what you're admitting to on this? No. Kind of sounds like it.
No, what I'm saying is that they actually reactivated the servers.
Of course they did, Vin. And it's totally not you. You kicked the Ethernet cable that one day or something.
Pete, I'm going to say kiss it, because, mate, I wasn't the only one that was losing it when they shut down the servers. There was whole threads of it on our good old favorite Gearspace, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. So they just quietly, very quietly just reactivated. So I have my Acusonus plugins back again, which is kind of very good. Thank you very much. But look, just getting back to those sessions, Chris, I've pulled stuff from Cubase VST. Remember the old version 5? And they had
yes.
They had the
blue one.
Yeah, they had the song and the arrangements, and I've managed to kind of salvage those for clients, and I had to do it in steps. So I did it in...
Yeah, steps might be the key. I did find in my backups quite a lot of imaging of the OSs that I was sort of into doing some time ago, and actually that worked really well. I just brought up some old images on a sort of blank computer, and everything was already activated and authorized. So, like when you do a image of your software on your computer, and then you can put it back up for backup.
But did you do it on the same machine?
Yeah.
On the same machine? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
on the same machine.
machine.
Yeah, same old machine. Yeah, that's fine, because you're not going to throw an image on a different machine. The hardware's going to go, hang on, what are you trying to pull off here?
Yeah, but it'll hick up a little bit. But you can also bring them into some VMs too. But that actually kind of worked okay for some of them. But then I gave up. I'm like, this is a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
I got the stuff I really wanted, and that was the end of that.
Yeah. Look, and then it is interesting that you're saying you're having problems with some of the sessions not even loading. So that's interesting. So that's something that I need to be aware of as well, which is good. Because occasionally I get clients saying, is there any way you can actually salvage this old session from some and of course, here's me. I've got these old machines running XP, and
well, but that's the lucky thing. You can go back to that. I mean, the problem is no one's really got that, so it's difficult. Yeah,
yeah. So I keep those machines archived for that exact thing. I mean, I've got some stuff that I need to kind of bring forward from some of those old versions as well. So look, so have you got? Is there anything else, Chris? Before I
no, that's been enough of a time waster for me.
Right. Yeah.
Trying to get all my files back in order.
Yeah. Look, I haven't had too much.
Final Cut's a massive problem because the older versions of Final Cut don't load to the new ones.
Right.
You can't. You've got an XML out, and it just doesn't. With multicam stuff, doesn't work. It's just a nightmare. Just got to try and load it back up in the older version you had and redo your exports.
Yeah. Well, as far as support stuff, I haven't really had a lot. I mean, I've had, I've been trying to help some clients, like just really basic stuff, like like Wavelab project save. You create a project, you save it, you exit it, it deletes the project. And it's like, what? And I've been trying to help a client over the last week or so with this, and I'm thinking, what? And apparently there's kind of like a temp and a permanent, and there was all of this kind of convoluted type of file management type of stuff, and I can't understand what the hell's going on. Something as basic as actually you put, let's say, 4 or 5 songs together into a project, right, or album project or EP, and you save it, and it actually the file size goes down to like 1K, and you can't reopen it again. It's just bizarre, right? And he's still trying to navigate that one. So that was one I thought was worth mentioning, and just in the sense that some of the most common and basic things like a file management system can throw up that type of stuff with long-term users of applications is kind of just beyond me. I don't know how that kind of stuff gets out into the ether, but it does. And the only other thing, Steinberg copy protection, this new copy protection of theirs where they've moved off the e-licenser, and I think that's going to come back and bite them on the arse. And I'm not going to go into too great a detail, but I think that's going to come and bite them on the arse with this new license manager. I've been knocking over client machines here with the new license manager, and it's just the strangest way to kind of navigate this stuff. Like, so you log in, it goes into this what's it called, dual level authentication.
Multi-factor auth.
Yeah, multi-factor authentication. Fires up the browser. You go into your account. It kind of then it fires it back into this license manager. You activate your software. You close it. You fire up the application. It says, "Hang on, it's not activated." You got to go redo it all again. And I'm like, going, "What the fuck is it doing? What did I just do?" 3 minutes ago, I just activated the software on this bloody machine, and then I closed down the activation manager, and I fire up Cubase, and it just says, "Well, hold on again, you got to go through it all again. It's not authorized." Well, what did it actually do?
The answer would be nothing.
And I've heard of people where it kind of it does kind of get confused like that, and then all of a sudden they're doing authorizations, and they use up their 3 authorizations.
So what's probably happening is you're not using the default browser on Windows, right? You're using what, Firefox or Brave or something like that?
Firefox on this one.
And so that's what you authorized in the first time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I bet if Cubase is popping up, not a full browser, but a little window.
No, full browser, fires up the full browser, Pete.
Is it the same browser?
Yeah, both times, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm wrong. I thought you were running into the issue that Creative Cloud has where you have to go in under a separate thing and authorize using the browser instead of their little pop-up window.
No, the browser is there just as an authentic, what did you call it? Multi-factor
auth, yeah. Right, but if you're dealing with a different browser or a different browser engine in the other cases, then the cookies don't get shared and stuff doesn't work out very well.
Slate Digital does that a lot. Every now and then when you open the app, it needs to go and authorize on the browser, and if you trigger the wrong browser, it no work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's another one that does the multi?
I had an interesting conversation about iLock with the manufacturer just a couple of weeks ago because there's a lot of this is a bit of a worldwide problem, but there's a lot of audio interfaces / software that's getting sold under the provision that you can return stuff if you don't like it,
right?
Which is a bit of a consumer law thing in some countries, especially here in Australia.
Yes.
But part of the problem of deactivating audio interfaces and software to then be able to be resold is a huge problem because a lot of the manufacturers can deactivate the hardware on their side, but they have no way of deactivating iLock licenses. So you can't return the products very easily at all. And iLock are just they want nothing to do with it. No, users activated it. The user has to deactivate it. There's no way around that.
So you're talking about the bundled software that comes with some interfaces?
Yeah. So some of it needs an iLock license, right?
Right.
And if you then, after 30 days, return the interface back to a dealer and say, look, I'm not happy. I don't want it. I went through your trial period, or you lease it, for example, there's actually no way to deactivate that interface to be resold because all the stuff's still sitting on iLock. So unless the customer actually physically goes and deactivates it, it's very difficult. You have to reissue software licenses, which they don't really want to do every time.
I actually ran into that with a synthesizer probably a decade ago with Access Virus, where if you sell one of those used, like this was a TI, right? But if you sell one of those used, you actually had to go to Access and get it reauthorized. I forget if this was for their plugin that interfaces with it or if it was just to download firmware or whatever, but you couldn't get into anything if the previous person didn't deactivate their license. And that's for to be able to use a piece of hardware.
Yeah.
It can get frustrating.
Yeah. Avid used to do that when they used to bundle their Inbox 3s and that type of stuff. I remember selling an Inbox 3 and then having to deactivate my license, and oh man, it was painful. But I did it, but it was very, very painful. Now, talking about iLock, you brought up iLock, and we've had this discussion before where now there's 3 levels of iLock, has been for a while, right? So you've got the physical key, you've got
cloud
system ID, and then you've got this, the cloud licensing, right? And some of the clients are pretty confused. They're thinking that the cloud license is a system ID. I've gone, no. Cloud license means that you need it has to be an internet connection at all time, whereas the license, because it's pinging and it's pinging back to the server and it's not going to work unless you're online. And yeah, there have been a few of my clients have been caught with that because they're thinking, I don't want to put it onto the key. So it's interesting. I've seen some of the software titles now will offer you, instead of all 3, they'll only offer you 2, and the 2 are physical key or cloud. Have you noticed that, Chris?
Yeah. They're going off, activating on your computer.
Right. So
they want you to use, but the problem is every time you launch your DAW and that plugin loads, you have to be online.
Yeah. So exactly right. So. And, you get the clients going, I'm sick of I'm going to get rid of that iLock key. And I'm going, just don't do it, right? But what happens if you lose your internet connection?
Work.
Yeah, they're going, well, when's that going to happen? All right. I was just
on an airplane.
Yeah, no. Well, I was speaking to a client who's he's up in upper New South Wales, up around some of those more remote areas, Chris, up around Nimbin, and he's up around there, right?
Yeah, they lose their net all the time.
He lost it for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and he lost his internet for 2 weeks, and he had a whole host of plugins that just were in the middle of sessions that he was dealing with that he had to actually deactivate and he couldn't get the mix session done. So 2 weeks, right? And I'm thinking, mate, put it on a key. So that's the point that I want to make, that be very, very careful. And that's interesting. You're saying that they actually are pulling away from the system ID. So I've still got everything on a key, but when I've been configuring client turnkey systems, if the key's not available and they've got an extra license, I'll activate it on the system. Otherwise, I just refuse to actually install and configure anything with an iLock because it's a fucking pain in the ass, if the key's not there for me. So
I've been doing a bit of both. So on some of the stuff that allows multiple applications, I've been either just doing it directly to my hardware and also then putting one in the cloud, but usually to switch computers.
Yeah, I can see the benefit, right? But if you've got multiple licenses, it's fine, and you can put one in either or, right? But if you've only got one license,
yeah, it's a problem.
It is a problem. And just one last point.
It does work though. I mean, iLock for most part of it actually works pretty well.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. Look, I'm not a huge fan on copy protection, in general, but I prefer physical keys, right? So, i.e., iLock and especially e-licenser, right? And I never had a problem with the e-licenser stuff. And, a lot of the Steinberg users now are going, yeah, I know, but we get 3 licenses on the new licensing algorithm, right, with the license manager. And I'm going, well, there was no reason why Steinberg couldn't give you multiple licenses previously. Just buy an extra iLock, an extra e-licenser, right? So I don't buy that. It's great now because we get 3 licenses instead of 1. It should always be multiple, in my opinion. Studio One, what is it? I think we got 5.
5.
We got 5. All right.
Have to be your computers on your network, but yeah, 5.
Yeah, 5. And I've had instances where during testing and qualifying and everything else where I've exhausted the licenses and I've just gone, hey guys, this is what I've done. They know who I am, and they've gone, here you go, here's another 5. But the thing is how many machines are running Studio One at any one time in my studio? 2.
1, 2.
No, 2.
No. Pete, imagine what's going to happen the day the iLock comes on a USB-C.
Isn't it already on a USB-C?
Is it on a USB? I thought they were all still Type A, aren't they? You can actually get them on USB-C.
No, there's a USB-C.
Oh, stand corrected.
Woohoo, look out.
Yeah. That's a complete waste of a USB 3.1 port.
You'd be surprised, mate. I've got machines that have got iLock and e-licenses, and I put them into the USB 3 ports because I reserve the USB 2 ports for USB 2 interfaces. Geez, why would I do that?
Don't know. Because it works?
Yes, correct. I've only got one last point. Native access. And I love native access. I only hit this yesterday, and it's the newest version of native access. And there wasn't a lot of titles on this client machine that I'm finishing off. And it installs all of the plugins and stuff, and it starts getting to the libraries. And I get this, you ready? Native access, invalid location. I've gone, what the fuck are you talking about? It's a brand new machine. The sample library has been allocated to the dedicated sample NVMe drive, to the native instruments folder, as I've done hundreds of times over the years, right? This thing's going, no, invalid location. Okay. So, I was thinking, all right, well, exit out, restart the machine, and reassign all of the locations again, right? No, invalid location. I'm thinking, I can't be on an island here. So do a quick web search. Thing lights up like a Christmas tree. It's cross-platform, right? And the shit that people have actually been doing to get around it, like past standing on one leg, pointing their ass towards the sun and whistling, Dixie. Remove this, put an earlier version on, make sure it doesn't update, activate your software, and then uninstall the earlier version, reinstall the new version. And I'm like, why would I want to do that? So I did actually attempt that, right? The problem being is that I did find an earlier version and I fired it up. It didn't list it. It didn't list the libraries. I'm going. Doesn't
know what they are.
Didn't know what they were. So I went, that didn't work. So went back to the last one, invalid location. Get this, Pete, you're going to love this one, all right? You know what it's referencing when you're saying location?
What?
Folder.
No. Come
on. I was going to say folder. I have no idea.
System location. As in, it is actually pinging the, what's it called? The location
server?
Yeah, location server.
Oh, like actually your
Location.
Physical location, like GPS coordinates.
Yeah. Guess what? That's blocked, right? So this thing's going, well, no, I'm not going to let you install the library. I'm like, yeah, get fucked. I'm not going to sit there and unlock all of that because it wasn't like a major library setup. It was kind of like a freebie type of thing. I've gone, you know what? That's just ridiculous. Now, I have done hundreds of systems with the same type of settings where I'm blocking location monitoring, right? And it's never been a problem. But all of a sudden, you know, I think, oh, no, I need to know the location of your machine. Well, here's the problem, right? If that is really going to be a thing and I activate it at this location and that machine gets moved to the client's house and it's at a different location, it's going to drop the bloody libraries again, right? I mean, what is all that about? So I'm not very happy with Native Instruments. If you're listening in, I think that's kind of a bit ridiculous because that was a solution that a guy found that he tracked down the location options in Windows 10 or 11, and Native Instruments had actually created an item in the list and it had to be activated. I'm like, that ain't happening, mate. You are not going to sit there and try and dictate to me that I can't.
Where I live. Yeah,
I can't install a sample library on a physical hard drive because you need to know where my location is, right?
It's not that they created an item in the list, but they tried to access your location and that was blocked by default. So they ended up in the list of apps, right?
Either way, no way, Native Instruments, right? There's just no way, you know. So I'll find out probably the hard way when I've got a client that has got, you know, 200 to a terabyte of bloody sample libraries that I'm going to sit there and try and install for them at the back end, and this thing's going to go, well, I'm not going to let you unless you unlock your location. And then knowing full well that when the machine gets moved to the client's location, it's going to block it again. So I found that quite infuriating, actually. But I think, and it is cross-platform. But the other thing is that was a solution for the Windows, but on the Mac it was different. They were saying go back to an earlier version.
I was having the problem where it kept telling me my hard drive location was full, even though it wasn't.
This is on the Mac?
Yeah, it'd go to install and it would just go, you're full. And I'm like, no, there's like 600 gigabytes free space. I'm not full. But their very latest version that dropped, I think, 2-3 days ago that I picked up seemed to have fixed that problem.
Well, that's the version I'm using, and it's just introduced another one. So there you go. Yeah, great.
Chris, was actually saying your house is too full. It wasn't your hard drive. So
yeah, that's what it is. Too many computers.
Yeah, totally. Too many computers in your house. You have to move.
Yeah. There you go.
Not happy.
Hey guys, oh my God, 3 hours again. We've done it again. And
you've done it again.
I've done it.
Yeah, I was thinking that's for very low values of we, Vin. I think it's you've done it again.
We. No, I'm going to stick with we. All right, guys. Again, that has been fantastic again and great fun as per usual. Thank you again for your time and energy to the both of you. And with that, on to the next.